Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku was the amazing spider hero part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, DangoSage from Wattpad. So let's start the video. Wake up, Izuku. You're gonna be late for the internship program today, a woman with greenish-black hair said as she banged on a door with her fist. A young man grunted as he didn't want to get out of bed today. Today was just one of those days. But his mom wouldn't let him stay in bed all day like he would hope she would. Okay, I'm awake, he said as he rubbed his eyes and looked out his window at the streets of Japan. He then stood and opened the window, before sticking his head out to get a breath of fresh air. Well, hurry up and get ready, breakfast is waiting on the table, his mom said. Okay, thank you, he said back before moving toward his towel to prepare to take a shower. After he showered and was ready to leave his room, he walked out and toward the dinner table to eat. He pulled up a chair and sat down before eating his breakfast. After eating, he set his dishes into the sink. Do you need a lift to get to the lab? His mom asked as she came out of the bathroom in a bathrobe. No, not really, I'll be fine, Mom, he said and gave a gentle smile. She smiled back and walked up to him and embraced him in a hug. It seems like just yesterday you were playing with toys on your bedroom floor, and now, you're already getting an internship. I'm so proud of you, Izuku, she said and kissed his forehead. I love you, Mom, Izuku said before pulling away. But I've gotta go now, he said and unlocked the front door to leave. He waved at his mom before leaving and closing the door behind him. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I live with my mom in an apartment on the bad part of town. Because it was the cheapest place we could afford. And I'm quirkless. My father died when I was young, so that just leaves me and my mom. For the longest time, I've been searching for anything that I can find about my father. But I've never come up with anything. My mom hid any and all information about him, so all I have to go by is the random things she'd mention about Dad. But now, I've found something completely amazing. The place where he used to work. That's where my internship is. At a place called 𝗂𝗏 Labs. My father used to work there for a living. From there, I'll find out what exactly happened to my father. That's why I interned there in the first place. I will find out what's happened to him. Izuku arrived in front of the huge building with the words, 𝗂𝗏 Labs and a hologram out front. He nodded before entering the building. Once he entered, a woman noticed him and walked over. She seemed to be a foreigner. Hello, my name is Paige and I'm the head scientist around here. You must be Izuku Midoriya, right? Did I pronounce that right? I'm still trying to get used to the whole Japanese names thing, she said with a smile. Paige was wearing a white dress shirt with a pencil skirt. She was blonde with blue eyes and had on red high heels. She was exceptionally appealing as well. She also had a lab coat on over her outfit, with her name tag and her position in the company. Yeah, that's how you say it, he said with his forced smile still firmly in place. Paige raised an eyebrow when she saw that the smile was fake. But she decided not to question him on it. Well, this is 𝗂𝗏 Labs, let me give you a proper tour of the place, she said and leaned forward a bit, exposing a bit of her bust to Izuku without knowing it. Izuku tried his hardest not to freak out. Paige started walking away and motioned for him to follow. Izuku followed as she explained and pointed at certain things in the room. Once Izuku and her walked past a certain room that had a sign out front that said, "No trespassing. Only authorized personnel beyond this point. That room seems important. Bet that's where I'll find my info. Hey, don't you think it would be best for me to socialize with my future colleagues?" he said and stopped walking. Yeah, I suppose so. Go take a look around and socialize with the other scientists. I'll be waiting right here, she said and tilted her head with a smile. Izuku nodded before walking toward a room with other scientists at work. Gotta get an access card to enter that room, he thought as he closed the door behind him. Hey guys, Paige said that I should socialize with you guys a bit, so here I am, he said and smiled an innocent smile. So are you the new intern or something? A man that appeared to be in his middle ages said. Yeah, that's me, he said as his smile slowly faded. There's no need to be so harsh, Ben, a woman said. Hey, what's your name? She asked. Izuku, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, he said and smiled once more. You smile so much that it annoys me. Go socialize somewhere else, Ben said and waved Izuku away. Don't mind Ben, he's always grumpy, another guy said. My name is Tanaka, he said and stuck out his hand. Tanaka was a relatively good-looking guy, with black hair and eyes. But he seemed to have some sort of burn mark on his hand. Nevertheless, Izuku shook his hand. So do you guys work on nanotechnology? I've been studying it a bit myself, he said and rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Good job, you can read. It said that on the door of the room, Ben said and put on a pair of protective goggles and began to work with some nanites. Hey, you need any help with anything? He asked with a nervous expression. Oh yeah, can you move those boxes over there? Tanaka asked politely. Izuku nodded before picking up the boxes and noticing Ben's access card on one of the desks. He picked up the boxes with some difficulty. Just move them over there, Tanaka said and pointed toward the door. Izuku nodded and moved 2 of the 7 boxes toward the door. He kept moving boxes until he got to the last one. He picked it up and placed it on the desk over Ben's access card before picking it up as he lifted the box. Well, I think I should go back to Page now, Izuku said with a smile. Okay, sure, Tanaka said. Izuku left the room with a smile. Smooth Izuku, he said and walked toward Page. Hey, sorry, but I'm gonna go to the bathroom quickly, he said. It's okay, I need to check something out anyways, Page said as she tapped away on her tablet screen. Izuku nodded and walked toward the bathroom that he noticed when he entered. Once he was sure no one was looking, he changed directions and walked over to the room. He swiped Ben's card and entered the room. Once he was inside, he noticed a bank of consoles. He plugged in a device and connected it, wirelessly, to his phone. He nodded when he saw that it said, Files Transferring on his phone screen. He then exited the room and walked over to Page. Hey Page, I'm actually feeling kinda sick today. Can I come back tomorrow? He said as he pretended to be sick. Page looked at his face, noticing the sweat from lifting the boxes before. Yeah, sure, go for it. I hope you get better, she said with concern evident in her voice. Izuku nodded and walked out the building. He pulled out his phone and checked and saw a flashing 100%. He nodded before pressing a button on his phone, and the device he plugged into the computer exploded, breaking into smoking pieces as they hit the floor. Izuku opened the files on his phone and skimmed through till he found an old report about an old lab with a picture of his father on the cover. Dad, he said and got the address of the place before heading there. Once he arrived, he paid the taxi driver the fare and entered the building. It was way out in Kyoto, but luckily that wasn't so far from where he was. Once he was inside the building, he walked around until he noticed a door that said, Mr. Midoriya, and entered. The room was filled with dust and had old pictures. Looks like Dad knew All Might, he said as he picked up a picture of his dad with the superhero himself. He put down the picture and walked off. He then saw a few pictures of spiders on the wall and DNA sheets. What were you doing in here, Dad? Izuku asked before tripping over a box and crashing through the floor. He coughed a bit as some dust got into his lungs. A secret cough room, he said and looked around. There were more spider drawings and DNA sheets all over the room. What's that? He asked as he noticed a broken tank with webbing inside it. A spider was held in here, he deduced before he felt something bite him on the neck. He slapped it off him and looked at the spider on the floor. It was red, blue and black with black and blue eyes. Kinda like All Might's. The spider crawled away under the tables and left. What the? He said as he started to feel woozy. I don't feel so good, he said before he fell down and all his senses went to black. Izuku woke up on a cold hard floor of the abandoned building he entered before. He rubbed his cheek as he stood up. What happened? He said before his brain was rushed with memories of how he got like that. It's kinda dark in here, he said. Just then the pain from the spider bite came back. Man, that demon spider, he said as he pulled out his phone. 22:34, Mom must be worried. Gotta get home quick, Izuku said as he switched on the flashlight on his phone and looked around. How am I gonna get out of here? He said and looked up at the hole he had fallen through before. Izuku walked over to the walls of the room and started tapping them. Maybe some sort of secret entrance or exit, he said as he placed his hand against the wall. No, he said and attempted to walk away, but he found that his hand was stuck to the wall. Is there glue here? He asked and looked at the wall confused. He kept pulling till his hand was free. Geez, he said as he started moving his hand around. A web suddenly shot out of his wrist and latched onto a table in the room. What the? He exclaimed, both shocked and confused. Webs? From my hands, he said and examined the webs. He let go of the web line before shaking his head. This is all confusing, let me try to make sense of this. I got bit by a spider that kinda looked like All Might, and now I can shoot webs from my hands and my hand got stuck to the wall. Let me check this out, he said and picked up some sheets of paper and skimmed through them. 𝗧𝗏 to do a test to mix All Might's DNA with a spider. He was trying to see if you could give a quirk to someone who didn't have one. Figures, mixing All Might's DNA with something else's DNA would do this. So, I have the abilities of a spider. So, I have a quirk. Izuku yelled with joy. This is amazing, he said and jumped in joy. Okay, what can a spider do? A spider can lift over 100 times their body weight, it can climb up walls and shoot webs. Plus it has a powerful sensory organ which tells it if it's in danger. So, it would be safe to say that I can do all those things, he said and jumped in joy. But I'll test all this tomorrow. For now, I've got to find out how to get out of here, he said and scratched his neck where the bite is. Wait, he said and walked over to the same wall as before. He placed his one hand onto the wall, then his other, then his foot, before slowly climbing up the wall like a spider until he got out. Once out the hole, he looked at his hands in amazement. Izuku ran out the building onto the streets of Kyoto. He then walked into an alleyway feeling amazing. This is great. He yelled and jumped up about 5 meters. Whoa, he said as he landed once more. Wait, how did I shoot those webs before? I did a specific hand sign, he said and started doing random hand signs, until a web shot out his wrist when he folded his middle and his right ring finger onto his palms and having all the others outstretched. A web shot out and latched to the wall of a building. Yes. He yelled. Hey kid, give us your money. A guy said as him and his group stared at Izuku. Perfect way to test out my abilities. Let's go boys, he said and shot a web at the one's face, blinding him before kicking him, sending him flying into a wall. One of them grabbed a pipe and tried to hit Izuku from behind. Suddenly, a buzzing was felt in his head and he flipped over the man and webbed the pipe before pulling it so it would smack the man in the face. Izuku then webbed right in front of the one and pulled himself toward the man and punched him across the face once he arrived. He felt the buzz, so he dodged a punch from a guy and webbed him in the face before kicking him. He webbed onto a box and swung it into the one guy. The buzz came, so he flipped onto a wall before pushing off and punching the guy in the face. He twisted to see a guy behind him. He ducked under an attack and jumped up and punched him into the air. He webbed the man and pulled him close and kicked him. Now all the men were knocked out. Izuku looked around at how he had beaten up the men. Yes, he yelled out. He exited the alleyway, feeling amazing. Suddenly his phone buzzed in his pocket. Hello, he said, trying to hide his happiness. Hey Izuku, it's Paige. I was calling to ask, did you see anyone suspicious enter the building when you left? One of our scientists found a bug in our offices, she said. Paige picked up the busted USB on the floor and examined it as she held the phone to her ear. The security cameras didn't seem to catch anything, she said. They transferred some very sensitive files, she said, and threw the bug in the bin. No, sorry, I didn't see anyone, Izuku said as he looked around. Oh, okay, Paige said from the other side of the line. But anyways, are you feeling better now? You were sweating a lot earlier, she said, and her concern seemed to be oozing out the phone. Yeah, I'm much better now, Izuku said as he looked at his hand. Hey Paige, you guys have a special area to test quirks, right? He asked. Yeah, why do you ask? She said. Well, I recently awakened to a quirk, and I was hoping if I could test it, he said. Yeah, sure, swing by tomorrow and we can test you, she said. Paige held a smile on her face as she spoke with Izuku. Izuku smiled at nothing in particular. Thanks Paige, he said and hung up. Paige removed the device from her ear with a smile. Izuku jumped up in joy once more before heading home. Next day, Izuku woke up with an excited expression on his face. He webbed the roof and pulled on it so that he'd get out of bed fast. He landed on the roof and stood upside down. "Yeah," he yelled. Suddenly, his phone rang from his bedside table. He webbed the phone and pulled it to him. The phone landed in his palm and he answered the phone call. "Yes," he said, not even trying to hide his happiness. "Wow, you sound happy. Anyways, I'm calling to find out what kind of quirk you have so I can prepare tests," Paige said. "Oh, the abilities of a spider," he said and flipped off the roof and landed like a normal person. "So like crawling up walls, web shooting, strength and senses?" she asked. Paige sat with her legs crossed on her couch, wearing only a bathrobe as she held a cup of coffee. "Yeah?" Izuku's voice came through the phone. "Okay, I'll prepare some tests for you," she said and placed down her cup and opened her computer. "Thanks, Paige," he said. Izuku looked at himself in the mirror and noticed his muscle. "No problem, I love finding out about quirks," she said. Through the phone. "Bye," she said and hung up. Izuku looked into his mirror and flexed. "Super strength, this is amazing. But how am I gonna explain my sudden muscle gain to Mom? Actually, how am I supposed to tell her that I have a quirk in the first place?" he said as he examined his abs. "But this is amazing," he said and flexed once more. "Okay, enough flexing, I've gotta head out to see Paige," he said and got ready to leave. "Hey Mom," he said as he passed his mom on the couch. "Morning Izuku," she said with a smile. She then looked at him with a curious expression when she noticed his choice of clothing. He wore his Christmas sweater that she gave him that didn't fit before and some jeans that were oversized before. But they both seemed to fit him now. "Izuku, I thought those clothes didn't fit you," she said and tilted her head. "Yeah, I went through a sudden growth spurt. That happens to boys my age," he said and smiled nervously. She gave him a serious look for a few seconds. "Oh okay," she said and shrugged. "Anyways, I'm heading out now," he said. "But you never ate breakfast," she said. "I'm too excited to eat breakfast," he said back with a goofy grin before running out the front door. His mom smiled at him as he ran off. "Time to catch a train to Nara Labs," he said, but just at that moment, an idea appeared. "Wait, I don't need a train. I can web swing," he said as he fist pumped. He looked at a building and webbed it before pulling himself to it. From there, he web swung all the way to Nara Labs. "I can't keep doing that, after all, using your quirk in public without a superhero license is illegal," he said and entered Nara Labs. Once he entered, he looked around for Paige. He spotted her across the room and smiled. "Hey Paige," he greeted and walked over. As he walked over, he admired how good she looked in her outfit. She was wearing a pair of brown skinny jeans with black high heels, a white dress shirt and a pair of brown triangular earrings to end it off. Her overall first impression from Izuku was one word: appealing. "Oh hey Izuku, I've planned all sorts of tests for you. I can't wait to get started with it," she said and did a small jump in joy. She seemed to be as excited as Izuku. They both moved over to a room that was white with metal walls all round. "This is our special testing room. We test people's quirks in here because, if their quirk becomes out of control, the walls are insulated with a special type of metal that can completely nullify quirks," she said as she looked down at her tablet. "Alrighty then, let's get started with the first test. Strength test. Just stand on that digital X right there," she said. "Oh yeah, by the way, you're gonna need to take off your shirt to do this, right?" she said. Without questioning her, Izuku removed his shirt and suddenly some wires shot out the ground and attached to his body. "We'll be able to see what kind of reaction your body will have with this," she said and finally looked up from her tablet to see Izuku's abs. "How can he have such a body?" she thought. "Okay, we're gonna start now," she said with a grin. She pressed a button on her tablet and a motorcycle came down from the roof, attached to a chain. Izuku caught the vehicle and lifted it with one hand. "Okay, next one," she said as the chain pulled the motorcycle up and a car came down. Izuku caught it with a smidge of trouble. "At least now I know who to call if my car breaks down," she said as a joke. Izuku and her shared a small laughter. "Okay, next." The car went back up and suddenly a trailer came down. Izuku lifted it with some trouble. Paige pressed the button once more and the trailer went back up and a truck came down. Izuku finally started to, slowly, cripple under the weight of the truck. Paige nodded and the truck flew back up. Paige pressed her little button once more and a tank came down. Izuku immediately started to cripple and fall under the weight, but he tried his hardest to lift the tank. He kept crippling till he was eventually on one knee. It seems this is the extent of your strength. Now we can move on to the next test, she said. What is it? Izuku asked as he tried to catch his breath. We're gonna see how different emotions affect your strength, she said and started the test. The tests went on like this for the rest of the day until they were finished. I had no idea that it would be this hard, Izuku said as he drank down a whole 2L bottle of water. Wow, you must have been thirsty, Paige said and chuckled. So, now that you know all your stats, what are you gonna do? She asked as she drank her own water. I'm gonna aim to become a hero, he said simply. His face was one of determination, a type of determination that you knew that you couldn't stop. Well, the UA entrance exams are in 7 months. Try making it into you, as she said. I was planning on it, Izuku said and checked his watch. Oh, I gotta go, Paige, he said and stood to run away. Okay, I'll see you, Izuku, she said. And with that, our young hero trained for this 7 months to make it into you. 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏. I woke up to the sound of my alarm and webbed myself out of bed. I was now standing on my wall sideways as I did squats. Over these past few months, Paige has been training me to be able to make it into you. I thought she was just a normal scientist, but I found out that she actually exercises every day to be fit and keep her figure. I remember when I first found out about her. Flashback, I stood in front of a huge 5-star hotel in awe. Paige lives here. I walked inside and felt out of place in my tracksuit. Everyone else was wearing fancy clothing and their snobby kids were laughing at my slacks. I went over to reception and requested to see Paige. The guy at reception told me that she lived in the penthouse on the top floor. I headed up there to meet her and found her in a sports bra sweatpants and Nike sneakers looking ready for a run. Are you ready, Izuku? She asked as she put her golden locks of hair into a scrunchie. We're about to go on a run, but you're gonna do more running than me, then we're gonna head over to the gym and you're gonna lift weights. Then after that we're gonna head over to a beach so we can move all the rubbish that people have dumped there, then we're gonna come back here and do some hot yoga, she said with a smile. End of flashback, and that's what I've been doing up until this day. Now, I'm gonna head over to Paige's for some final training. Training with Paige, I've increased my strength, stamina, endurance, speed and web swinging abilities. I've moved on from wall crawling to wall running. And it's all thanks to that woman. I looked at my door as my mom walked inside. Izuku, what have I told you about standing on the walls? She said with a stern voice. Not to, I said and flipped off the wall. That's right. Now, have you seen my phone? I can't find it anywhere, she said. No, not really, I said. She nodded and left my room. I need to finish putting in that tracking device into her phone, I whispered as I walked over to my workstation. Yes, I'm bugging my mother's phone, 𝗬𝗵𝗲. But it's just to protect her. Now that I have a quirk, I can protect my mother from harm and keep her safe. That's the least I could do, I said and finished putting the tracker in. There, all done, I said as I stretched out. Hey Mom. I yelled as I left my room and flipped onto the couch. Yes, Izu, she said, using the nickname she gave me when I was younger. I found your phone in between the couch cushions. I yelled back. Really? She yelled back and fast walked into the TV room. Yeah, I just sat down and there it was, I said and shrugged. But, I'm sure I looked here, she said and scratched her head confused. Maybe you didn't look hard enough, I said as I stood. Yeah, maybe, she said and walked off. But thanks, Izu, she said from the other room. I nodded and walked into my room to prepare to take a shower. After my shower and getting dressed, I headed out to Paige's place. I ran there at full pace. I headed up the stairs instead of using the elevator. Once I was at her door, I knocked gently. It's open, Izuku, she said, and I opened the door to already see the hot yoga mats out. Aren't we gonna do the full exercise today? I asked as I sat on my green mat. No, not today. We're just gonna go straight to the yoga, she said and started. Okay, I guess, I said and started doing the hot yoga with her. Just like every other time we did hot yoga, I noticed her figure once more and admired it. I'm no perv, but when it's right in front of you, it's hard not to notice and or stare. Once we finished with the stretches, we rested for a bit. Okay, now that your body is all relaxed, you can do much better in the 𝐎 entrance exams, she said and smiled. Speaking of the 𝐎 entrance exams, I'd better get going if I want to make it to the exams on time, I said and got ready to leave. Okay, good luck, Izuku. Oh, and take this, she said and handed me a black suitcase. Now go, she said and giggled at my confused face. I backed away slowly with a confused look before leaping out her window. I landed safely on the ground before jogging to UA. I made it to UA and looked at the suitcase that Paige handed me. I had it in my right hand as I walked. I decided to investigate what was inside the case, so I stopped jogging and tried to open it. But suddenly a piece of paper flew out of the bag and landed on my lap. I picked it up to read it. You tried to see what was inside, didn't you? Well, this bag won't open until 11:45, because that's 15 minutes before the exam starts. I really want this to be a surprise. Love, Paige, squinting face with tongue, winking face with tongue. I smiled at the little note before placing it in my pocket. Okay, Paige, I won't open it, I said and continued jogging till I reached the entrance. Once there, I tripped and some girl saved me with her quirk. Then we headed inside together and the exam got explained. It is now 15 minutes before the exam will begin, so the case should open now. Speak of the devil, I said as a clicking sound came from the bag. The bag opened and inside was a golden and black outfit that seemed way too big for me. I took it out and looked at it. If you read the author's note and looked at the pictures, you'd have a kind of rough idea what the suit looks like. I put the suit on and saw how it slumped down on me. What was Paige thinking? This is definitely too big for me, I said as I tried to put it on properly. I saw that there was a button on the chest piece, so I tapped it and the suit seemed to fit me perfectly. Wow, I said as I looked in the mirror. I looked back inside the suitcase and noticed a golden mouthpiece with a sticky note attached to it. I picked up the mouthpiece and read the sticky note. This is the final piece. Put it over your mouth and press the button on the side. I read out loud and did as instructed to afterwards. I watched in the mirror as some sort of cyber cloak came over my face, making my eyes look golden, resting in a sea of black, with black hair and gold pieces in it. Whoa, I look like a totally different person, I said and examined myself. Well, time to see what I can do, I said and ran toward the examination area. I arrived swinging in from the side and landed in front of everyone. Whoa, who's that? Is that a hero? Is he gonna do the exam? I heard people whispering about me behind my back, but I decided to ignore them. We will be beginning the exam in 3, 2, 1, go. I heard Present Mike's voice through the loudspeaker. It took people 3 seconds to realize that the exam had started, but it only took me 1. I leapt into action the second after he said, go. I swung and webbed one robot and swung it into another robot, before flipping and kicking one's head off. I then whipped around and webbed behind one robot and pulled to slide under his legs and punched through the robot's head. I continued taking out robot after robot, until suddenly the 0-pointer Present Mike spoke about appeared. Everyone started running in a state of panic but me. I stood firmly in place as I heard a cry for help. It came from the girl that stopped me from falling before. Her legs seemed to be twisted in some weird manner and she was crying. Crying for help. Narrator P. Izuku stood still and many thought that he was paralyzed with fear. All Might especially was confused. He sat in the staff room with the other teachers and stared at Izuku. All Might had a feeling that Izuku knew that the robot was out of his league. So why was he just standing there? All Might and the other teachers sat on the edge of their seats and watched what the only participant who didn't run would do. Izuku webbed onto the edges of 2 buildings and started moving backwards slowly. Like a slingshot. What is he doing? Asked Midnight as she watched with anticipation. Suddenly Uraraka's pleas for help became so strong that something inside Izuku changed. His W flipped and suddenly his eyes began to glow white. He then stopped pulling back slowly and basically walked backwards. The teachers were now entertained beyond belief. Izuku jumped and slingshot forward with his fist outstretched. He punched right through the robot's head in a second as wind followed after. All the teachers stood and looked at the screen in shock, especially All Might. Izuku then landed on the ground safely before falling over. All the teachers had mixed expressions on their faces. How? Was all All Might had to say. Narrator P. Oh. Izuku got up and looked around him to find that he was lying in a pile of rubble. He looked at the robot as it saw its final moment when it fell down. A huge gust of wind was generated as it landed. The gust of wind blew sand, dust and other things into Izuku's face. He stood and looked at his surroundings feeling confused and a little tingly. He turned to see all the other participants looking at him strangely. Izuku felt strange inside, like a door that was once closed, was slowly opening. And if he was being honest, it kinda scared him. Suddenly his memories hit him like a tsunami, and he ran over to Uraraka to help her. He picked her up bridal style and dropped her off at the nurse's office in Recovery Girl's care. Izuku then left the exam replica city and went to Paige's place. He knocked on the door before entering and began to look around for her. "Hey Paige, Paige you home," he said and walked toward her bedroom to see that the door was open a bit and the vase next it was smashed. His eyes flew open wide and he ran right through the door, breaking it off its hinges and making it fly into the wall across the room. "Paige!" he yelled as he heard a scream. He turned to see Paige in only a towel sitting on her bed. He looked around in his new spider-like fighting-style pose. "Where's the threat?" he asked. Suddenly a slipper flew and smacked Izuku in the face. He fell over and landed with a thud as Paige walked over to him, clenching her towel tight onto her body. "Midoriya, what are you doing?" she yelled. "Oh well, I thought that you were in trouble, so I rushed into your room as quick as possible," he said as he stood and rubbed his cheek. "Why would you think that?" she yelled. "There was a broken vase and your door was slightly open. Not to mention that the rest of your penthouse was dark," he said. Paige sighed before sitting down on her bed. "The broken vase was just the result of a little rage, and the dark penthouse was just because I wanted to just take a bath and go to sleep afterwards. That's why I didn't bother switching on the lights," she said and huffed. "Oh okay then. Sorry about the door," he said and pointed at it. He walked over to it and picked it up easily before carrying it back to where it's supposed to be. "Yeah, you better be sorry," she said and sighed once more. "Are you mad?" he asked with a nervous edge to his voice. Paige picked up on this and realized that she was yelling a lot. "Yeah, kinda," she said. Izuku looked up at her and noticed her figure. She had a big bust which was slightly sticking out of her towel. An hourglass figure, appealing eyes and face. Her hair looked silky smooth and her legs were dazzling. A blush appeared on Izuku's face that he couldn't seem to suppress. Paige turned to look at him and noticed his blush. She looked down at herself before blushing and throwing her second slipper at him. "Get out!" she yelled, pointing at the door. Izuku ran out the door and ran to the roof of the penthouse. What doubled as the roof of the entire building. "Well, that was weird, Izuku. She caught you staring. Things are going to be different now," he said and Webb swung to another build before standing sideways on it. He shoved his hands into his pocket and calmly walked down the building. He got to the bottom and noticed how some were looking at him. "What? Never seen a person walk down a building before," he said and walked off. He reached home and went in through the window. Again, calmly walking up the building to his room. He entered and immediately grabbed his notebook, about to jot down the events of today. "Okay, let's break it down. My abilities are superhuman strength, web swinging and slinging and wall crawling. I haven't discovered any other abilities. But today, I was able to punch through a gigantic robot that's bigger than my apartment building. Something about it doesn't seem right. I feel stronger though. Like I could lift that tank like nothing now. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating. I could lift the tank with less effort now maybe. I wonder what else I'll figure out about myself." He scribbled down and closed the notebook. He then stood and walked over to his door. "Mom, you home?" he yelled and walked out the room. A flash of lightning came from outside that made Izuku jump a little. The rain came patting down on the windows slowly, then hard. Izuku walked over to the kitchen to see a note on the table. "Gone to go pick up some milk. We'll be back soon," was what the note said. Izuku smiled and looked out the window to see his mom returning from getting said milk. He smiled before he saw a hand grab her. "Mom!" he yelled and was about to jump out the window to save her by using his quirk, but then saw a police officer. He could get arrested for using his quirk in public. But what was the police officer doing just standing there? The police officer had a distinct gloved hand on his face and white hair. Izuku rushed into his room and grabbed the suit that Paige made him. He slipped it on and then jumped out the window, only to see his mom get thrown into the back of a van, and the van started driving off. The police officer also started driving off, which meant the police officer was in on it. Izuku web swung onto the top of a building as he followed the car. "Can't lose sight of the car," he said as he web swung to the next building before running along the building sideways and diving off it. He then shot a web onto the building on his left as the van turned left. He swung and flipped onto the top of a building, landing on the ventilation and doing a flip once more before shooting webs to the next building and pulling on it to get to the building. He looked up to see a huge neon sign in front of him that read Easy Sleep Hotel. He webbed onto the sides of the O and pulled so he could go through it. He looked down to see the van making a right. He looked sharply to his right and shot a web onto a building before pulling roughly to land onto the top of it. He ran across it and jumped to make it to the next building. He looked down and saw the van right below him. But now they had a few buddies. 2 other identical vans joined the first and the cop car. He looked at the vans with a skeptical look. The one at the back then stopped and parked in an alleyway as a man got out and grabbed another woman before throwing her into the back. Izuku immediately dived down and webbed the man's foot to the floor. He landed on the ground and punched the man across the face, knocking him out. He opened the back of the van and inside were more goons with guns. They shot at him and he took the bullets no problem. "The suit's bulletproof. The suit's bulletproof." He yelled happily and webbed onto the men's guns and pulled them out the van and knocking them both out as well. "You're free, people," he said, and they all ran out the van in terror. A little boy looked back at Izuku and noticed the golden spider and suit. He webbed onto the top of the building and pulled himself up. The boy witnessed in awe as he left. "Mori, why are you just standing there? Let's go." His mom yelled and the boy followed after her. Izuku looked at the vans with narrowed eyes. He began putting up chase again as he followed the vans easily. Half an hour later, Izuku had managed to follow the vans to a warehouse in the Chiyoda area. He landed onto the iron roof as the vans enter in through the front. He began crawling down the wall and into the warehouse as the doors closed. Izuku looked down at the vans as they threw the people out the van and onto the floor. He then saw his mother get thrown out. "Everyone get into line. Get ready to present your quirks," a man said. He had a huge rock body and a mean attitude. Izuku noted him as a possible problem if he needed to fight anybody. All the kidnapped people lined up in a line in front of a monitor. "First person, step forward," the man said. "Present your quirk," he said sternly. The lady stepped forward with a scared face. She was quivering in fear. "Why are they telling people to present their quirks?" Izuku whispered to himself. The women shot lightning out of her fingers as she shook in fear. "Please don't hurt me," she yelled. "Step to the left," the man said. The next person stepped forward. This time a man. "Present your quirk." The man looked around and vomited up acid. Izuku reeled back in disgust and so did others. "Step to the left." They continued this procedure as they asked people to step to the left and the right. When Izuku's mother came up to present, she told them that she was quirkless. She got told to step to the right like a few others. Izuku noticed a trend in what they were doing. They were telling everyone with a badass quirk to move to the left and all the people without a badass quirk to the right. Once all the people in the line were done with, the man of rock looked at the monitor before barking orders. "Everyone on the left, get into a van." He yelled and they all scrambled into one of the 2 vans. "Hey, where's Morty? He's supposed to be here by now," the rock guy asked. The police officer with a hand on his face stepped forward from the darkness of the warehouse. After all, the only light in the warehouse was the monitor. "I don't know, I've called 9 times now," he said back. "He must have been caught by a hero then," rock guy said. "Whatever. All the people on the right, you will be killed, whatever. All the people on the right, you will be killed," the rock man said, and Izuku's eyes widened. Suddenly, men with guns came out of the shadows with guns pointed at the people. And Izuku's mother. "No," Izuku said as the men with guns pushed the people back until they were on the cold iron walls of the warehouse. No, please. Mercy. Please, God, help. I have kids. I'm the only family my grandma has left. The people were yelling and pleading to deaf ears. The rock man and the guy with the hand on his face started walking away into the darkness of the warehouse. Izuku looked down as a cold sweat ran down his face as the reality of the situation hit him. It was up to him to save these people's lives. And his own. Izuku webbed onto the men's guns and threw them in front of the only light source, the monitor, so he knew where the weapons were. He then dropped down and kicked the first man before sliding under the next one's legs and kicking him upside the head. Twisted then webbed one of the guys in the eyes before webbing onto the floor in front of him and pulling to make it there before slugging him across the face. He webbed onto one of the guns and swung it, smacking the guy over the head with it and doing the same with the last guy. Izuku turned to see the civilians looking at him with a hint of fear in their eyes. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you," he said. But they were all still cowering in fear. "It's okay, everyone. I trust this hero." Izuku looked to see his mother giving him a smile. He smiled under his mouthpiece. "What?" the man with hands yelled as he looked at Izuku from inside the van. "Take him out, Han," the hands guy ordered as he closed the back door of the van and the van drove off. Izuku watched as the rock guy charged at him. Izuku jumped out the gate when he saw it open. The van drove through the open gate as well and Izuku webbed onto the back of it and held on tight. "No, you're not leaving," he said as he pulled. Suddenly, a huge rock hand smacked him and he flew into a metal pole. His back smacked onto it and he slid down the pole. He looked up at the rock man walking over to him menacingly. He turned his head just in time to witness the van drive off. Izuku planted his hands firm onto the ground. When he did, the rainwater around him splashed and the light of his suit was reflected off it. A clap of thunder sounded in the sky and Izuku's hair flopped onto his forehead as it was now wet. Izuku felt his chest as a sharp pain resounded. The rock man punched down onto Izuku. But our little spider dodged easily and flipped onto the warehouse wall before jumping off and punching the rock guy. "So what should I call you?" he said and webbed the man's eyes, ignoring the roaring pain coming from his side and back. "Mr. Rocky." Izuku then flipped over the man's head and kicked him in the back. "No, that would be an insult to the boxer Rocky," he said as he dodged a fist coming toward him. He then slid under the rock man's legs and kicked him on the side of the head. The rock man stomped down and missed Izuku once more. "Mineral Man. Actually, I think that name's already taken by a hero," Izuku said as he jumped and webbed onto the floor next the rock guy and pulled, giving him a double kick to the head. Suddenly the man roared as he splashed in the water. "How about the pebble?" Izuku asked as he switched the web mode onto taser webs and shot the puddle that the rock man was in. He got shocked as he stood. Izuku then shot a buttload of webs, tying the man up in webs. "Time to put in work," he said as he unleashed a barrage of attacks on the man. The rock man broke free and looked at Izuku with anger. "Yep, the pebble is nice," Izuku said as he shot a web at the man. The rock guy caught the web and pulled Izuku toward him and punched him across the face, breaking the mouthpiece in half. He punched Izuku once more on the chest, ripping the suit more across the chest. The rock man then kneed Izuku on the side. A crunch was heard as Izuku's ribs broke. "Ah!" he screamed. "It doesn't matter what you call me," the rock man said and threw Izuku against the warehouse wall. "I'm only gonna be calling you one word, he said and kicked Izuku through the warehouse wall easily. Izuku lied on the floor in pain. He looked up at the civilians, who seemed to be in a state of horror and shock. None more than his own mother. Tears rolled down her cheeks when she saw him like that. Izuku stood slowly as the rock man began to charge at him. Izuku looked and saw that the huge doors to the warehouse were still open. He noticed how the rock man was charging head first and got an idea. He ran forward toward the doors and jumped before webbing onto both doors, and as the rock man's head came between the doors, he pulled hard and both doors slammed on his head, knocking him out. Izuku landed on the ground and noticed how his head had deformed from the sheer impact of the doors. His head was now sporting a new sort of squished-up horn on his forehead. It seemed like a clump of rocks. Screw the name 𝗕𝗶𝗄, you look more like a rhino now, he said and walked over to the civilians. Are you guys okay? He asked. We should be asking you that, a woman said as she looked at Izuku. They all nodded in agreement as they noticed that Izuku was just a child. Izuku looked down and noticed how his suit was ruined. The mouthpiece was broken and the cyber mask it put onto his face to make his hair and eyes look gold was malfunctioning, making half his face his normal green eyes and hair and the other half gold. His chest area was broken as the golden spider was scratched out, revealing his bleeding chest. His side wasn't as good either. The side was completely broken, showing that Izuku was bleeding. The shoulder piece was broken to reveal a bruised shoulder. His left calf piece was scratched and revealing wires inside. His right hand was missing its glove completely and his back was wrecked. The spider symbol gone. As if it was never there. I'm fine, those others in the van. I need to go save them. The rest of you guys, load into that van and drive to the nearest police station while I stop the other van, he said and webbed the now rhino-looking guy to the ground before heading off. He began running along the road before jumping and webbing onto a street light and pulling. He landed on top of the street light and webbed onto the next and did the same thing until he saw the van. He webbed onto the van and pulled as hard as he could. He landed onto the ground and mustered up what little strength he had left and pulled. He was slowly sliding forward as the van's wheels lit on fire from all the friction. The wheels then popped and Izuku stopped pulling. He webbed the doors and pulled them off their hinges easily. He walked over to the van as the other man with the hand on his face jumped out. You are irritating me, he said and walked over to Izuku. He tried to grab Izuku's arm, but he dodged and punched the man. He tried once more to grab Izuku's arm, but once again Izuku dodged and kicked him in the chest before spinning and punching him. Izuku then webbed onto a rock on the side of the road and swung it into the man. Izuku watched as the man got knocked out before walking over to the van. Are you guys alright? Someone get into the front seat and drive to the nearest police station, he said as he attempted to get into the van. When a hand grabbed his foot, and he noticed how his left boot slowly disintegrated. He freaked out and punched the man with the hand on his face. Izuku got into the back of the van and webbed the man with the hand on his face to the floor. Drive, he said as he saw the man in the front seat. They then sped off to the nearest police station in the town over called Minato. Once there, Izuku informed the authorities about where they could find the two villains. The police decided not to punish Izuku for not having a hero license. He got transferred to the nearest hospital after that to heal up. Izuku lay in his hospital bed still, not moving as he watched the news on the TV, and in latest news, we have gotten reports of a young boy saving over 30 people from being kidnapped. Apparently the boy was wearing a black spider suit and had the abilities of a spider. Somewhere else a blonde-haired woman watched the news as she drank her morning coffee. She was wearing a pink gown and white fluffy slippers as she leaned on kitchen counter and watched the news on her 84-inch flat-screen TV. Apparently the boy was wearing a black spider suit and had the abilities of a spider. The boy's name is Izuku Midoriya. Paige's eyes flew open wide as she spat out her coffee and placed the cup down before coughing. A picture of Izuku smiling came up on the screen. Here's footage from the crime scene in Chiyoda, the news lady said, and footage of Izuku fighting came on screen. Amazing that a young boy managed to save all those people. However, the boy won't be penalized for what he has done, as using your quirk in public is illegal if you don't have a hero license. But the boy got off with a warning for his great job at saving those people's lives. Here are what some have to say. The news lady went off screen and a man was seen on screen. He's a hero, he saved my life, he saved my son, so he's okay in my books, a woman said as she clutched her son. It was amazing. He was like whoosh and bang. The guys were out, another man said. That kid's a real hero, a woman said with a smile. We could have died if not for him, a teenage girl said as her parents hugged her. Izuku Midoriya, wherever you are. Thank you for saving our daughter, the mother said and cried into the husband's shoulder. However, not everyone believes that this boy was right in his doing, the news lady said as she appeared back on camera. Using your quirk in public is illegal. He's technically a criminal. And now he's getting a slap on the wrist for breaking the law. Come on, a man with mustache and slicked back white hair said. "And who are you, sir?" The women asked. "My name is Stan Lee Sweet Cakes, how are ya?" he said as he adjusted his glasses. "This is why people are just using their quirks freely. Because the police are too afraid to arrest a guy for doing the wrong thing," a guy said. The news lady then came back on. But the boy did manage to take down one of two notorious villains. One being Han Ping, who was found stuck to the ground of the warehouse incapacitated. A picture of the rock guy came on screen. But people are now giving him the title of the Rhino due to the fact that he now seems to be sporting a horn on his forehead. It's said that the boy also defeated his partner 𝗕𝗫𝗄. But 𝗕𝗫𝗄 managed to escape his sticky trap as remnants of webbing were found on the floor. So the villain is still at large. What are your thoughts on the Izuku Midoriya? Hero or criminal? Go to the channel's official website to see the full fight. On other news, Paige looked at her TV with wide eyes. The story was broadcast all over Japan and in some parts of China, America, Russia, Australia, and England. It was on every flat screen, billboard, computer, news website, news channel, social media app, and radio station in Japan. It was hard not to miss it. Within a day, everyone knew of Izuku's heroics. Izuku looked at the hospital TV with a smile at his own achievement. Suddenly, a knock came from his room door. It was Izuku's mother, Inko Midoriya. "Hey mom," he said, with that smile still firmly on his face. "Izuku, the doctor says that you've healed exceptionally quick and that you're ready to leave," she said and sat down next to his bed. "That sounds great. And it only took 2 days. Whatever the doc gave me really worked," he said and remembered the neon blue liquid the doctor gave him, saying that it will accelerate healing greatly. Izuku stood and clenched his hand. "Izuku, sit down for a sec," Inko said looking down. "I don't think that I can let you be a hero after what happened the other day," she said with a serious face. Izuku's eyes flew open wide with shock. "But why, I saved all those people," he said. "I'm just joking, Izuku," his mother said and looked up at him with a smile. Izuku held his heart as he laughed. "Don't scare me like that, Mom," he said and chuckled lightly. "After what you did the other day, it made me certain that I made the right decision letting you be a hero. I'm proud of you and I'm sure your father would be too," she said and gave a heartwarming smile. Izuku felt tears prick at his eyes. He sniffled as he looked at his mother. She stood up in worry for her son. "It's okay, Izuku, don't cry," she said and hugged. "I'm just playing," Izuku said and laughed. "You tricked me," his mother said and laughed as well. "Well, we best leave now. We've got at least a 1-hour drive ahead of us to make it to 𝗵𝗲𝗏, she said and Izuku nodded. "And to think, all this was over a carton of milk," Izuku said and chuckled once more. His mother did the same before leaving the room and closing the door behind her. Izuku's face then suddenly became serious. "That guy escaped, remnants of spider webs. That's not good, but I can't do anything about it. I got off with a warning this time. Next time I won't be so lucky," he thought and shrugged it off after. Later, after getting dressed in some proper clothes that Izuku's mother had bought at a nearby store, they hired out a rental car and drove back to the 𝗵𝗲𝗏 area. Once there, they dropped off the rental car at the next company station and headed home. On the way home, a lot of people stopped Izuku, requesting to take a selfie with him to post on social media. Some asking to record his voice to make it their ringtone. Some asking him to shoot a web or stand on the wall of a building. But he refused those requests. But it's safe to say that our young spider made a huge fan base from fighting off those two villains. As Izuku and his mother arrived home and walked over to their house. "Hey, are you SpiderIzuku, the guy from the news, who stopped those two villains?" the man asked with a smile. "Yeah, I am," Izuku said with a smile. "Can I please record you saying that all kids should do their homework and listen to their parents? My son can really be a pain. But you're his hero. He'd listen to you," he said, and Izuku agreed and got recorded while saying that all kids should respect adults. Once they entered their apartment, the man at the front desk greeted them. "Hey, Mrs. Midoriya," he said with a smile. The man had a scar on his left cheek and 2 gray eyes with black hair. "I see you choose gray eyes today, Sai," Inko said with a smile to the man. "Yeah, well, I thought I'd give it a try," he said. "Plus, this is all I can do with my quirk," Just change my appearance, he said as he suddenly turned into a spitting image of what Izuku looked like before he got his quirk. Izuku looked at him and noticed how frail and weak he used to look. It's like going back in time, Inko said with a chuckle. But, of course you've grown tremendously, Sai said as he went back to normal. Oh yeah, by the way, this came for you Izuku, he said and handed Izuku an envelope. Thanks, he said as he and his mother said goodbye to Sai and walked upstairs. Once in their apartment, Izuku opened the envelope to find a letter that said that he'd been admitted into, Mom, I'm in. I made it into UA. He yelled as he ran out his room. That's amazing Izuku, she said and hugged him. One step closer to becoming a real hero. Izuku looked at the letter once more before his phone rang. He webbed onto it from his bedside table and pulled it, catching it with one hand. He pressed the green answer button before a voice was heard. Ah, Midoriya, you're all over the news. In the suit that I made you, Paige said. Izuku smiled at her happiness for him. Yeah, I know. They say I'm a hero. I've gotten quite a fan base, he said and started picking the webbing off his phone. So now you've got fangirls? She asked. It sounded neutral, but a hint, just a hint, like a crumb of cake of another emotion was heard. But it was so small Izuku barely noticed it. Anyways, on the news I noticed your suit got wrecked. Swing by the lab so that I can fix it, she said with the happiness back in her voice. Okay, your friendly neighborhood Spidey coming over, he said and hung up. He grabbed the suit and packed it into his bag before heading toward the window and stopping. I got off with a warning last time. I can't break the law again. He thought and walked out the normal way. As he walked, he turned to hear cries for help. Help me! A guy shouted as he was being kicked and beaten in an alleyway. Izuku was about to charge in there and take out those guys, when he realized that he wasn't qualified to. But where were the heroes? Or the police to stop this crime? Is this crime too small for any attention? A man is being beaten and nobody's doing anything about it. Is this really what the world is like nowadays? Nobody cares if a man has been beaten half to death. The world only cares about bank heists and large-scale kidnapping. And if the man bleeds out and dies from the beating, still nobody cares unless he's a celebrity or a vice president. Is this what the world has come to? Well, I don't want to be a part of that system. Izuku thought and created a web ball and chucked it at one of the muggers' heads. He flew back and landed inside the trash. His friend, the second mugger, arrived and tried to punch Izuku. Izuku dodged and drop-kicked the man into his friend. Now both men were knocked out. And a weird sensation flowed through Izuku. Like the door from before inside him opened a little more. He could now make out a woman's hair behind the door. He shook off the weird feeling and went to go check on the man. You okay? He asked. Yeah, thank you, the man said. Good, because I was never here all right, he said and ran off. The man smiled and nodded after understanding his message. Izuku ran toward Nara Labs with a new resolve. He was going to help people. Once he entered, he walked over to Paige's workstation. Hey Paige, Izuku said as he entered. Paige turned and smiled at Izuku. Hey Aizu, she said, and Izuku seemed to freeze in place. Paige noticed this and gave a confused look. You called me Aizu, he said and tilted his head. Yeah, and what's wrong with Aizu, she said. Nothing, he said and smiled. He pulled the suit out of his bag and handed it to her. You really wrecked it, she said and held it in her hands, examining it up and down. Yeah, I'm sorry, Izuku said. No, it's cool. I like a challenge, she said and examined it a bit more. Hey Paige, I was thinking, maybe we could design 2 spider suits, he said and rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Why? She asked as she swiveled around to face him. Izuku had to restrain a blush at his embarrassment and how pretty she looked. Just in case my new one gets wrecked, he said. Paige narrowed her eyes at Izuku. Once again, Izuku restrained a blush at how cute she looked. Okay, she said slowly. Then they both started working on the suits together. Paige giving a few tips about style and Izuku giving a few tips about mobility. Later play the song. Now Paige and Izuku were taking a break from building suits and having a little competition. If I can get a reaction out of you, then you have to pay for lunch, Izuku said. Oh fine, she said and breathed in and out before her face was emotionless. Izuku stood and she watched him edge closer to her with a face that she'd never seen Izuku make before. He leaned in closer and closer to her until their noses were touching. At this moment, Paige was trying her hardest not to blush. Izuku backed up and smiled. "You're good," he said. "My turn," Paige said and stood. Izuku's face was emotionless, just like hers was. Paige walked behind him and whispered something in his ear. Izuku started fidgeting as he tried to keep his blush down. Paige walked back to her seat and sat down defeated. My turn now," he said and walked over to her and started leaning in once more. But this time his foot accidentally slipped and he kissed her smack on the lips. Paige's eyes shot open wide as she stared up at Izuku. Izuku stepped back with his own blush. "I guess we're both paying," he said, and Paige nodded. "So where do you want to eat?" he asked as Paige walked over to him. "We could go eat ramen or katsudon," he said as Paige put her arms around his neck. "Or maybe we could." He stopped talking as him and Paige kissed slowly. They both kept their eyes closed as they leaned into each other. The kiss was passionate and sparks flew between the two of them. Paige smiled into the kiss and so did he. Before they separated, "We should go eat now," Izuku said with a smile. "I would like that," Paige said. Izuku looked her up and down and she did the same to him. Before they left to go eat, Izuku arrived home that day with happiness flowing through his system. He jumped for joy as he smiled. He ran up the stairs and entered his apartment and kissed his mom on the forehead. "I love you, Mom," he said and hugged her. Right now, everything was cupcakes and rainbows for him. "What's with the sudden affection?" she asked with a smile. "Mom, don't freak out, Booty kinda got a girlfriend," he said and his mom squealed for joy. "That's wonderful, Aizu," she said and hugged him. "I know, right," he said. "What's she like?" his mother asked as she sat him down on the couch. "She's kind, pretty, considerate, smart, funny, she's everything in one," he said. "Oh, she sounds perfect," Inko said and gave her son another hug. "Well, I'm gonna head to bed, Mom," he said and stood. "Wait, when am I gonna meet her?" Izuku looked down, then up, then all around as he thought. "I don't know really," he replied. "Well, she has to come over for dinner at some point." Izuku's sweat dropped and nodded. Yeah, well, we're not there yet, but yeah," he said and walked off to his room. He dumped the bag with his 2 suits inside his room. He walked over to the bag and pulled out his new suit. He looked at his door and opened it. He looked at his door and opened it. "Hey, Mom, I'm really tired, so please don't bother me and let me sleep," he said. Okay, Izuku's sweet dreams," he heard her say. Izuku nodded and closed his room door as he looked at his new suit. "Time to go on patrol," he said. Slipped the suit on and marveled at how it came out. Get it? Marveled. Marvel's Spider-Man. No one. Okay, anguished face, neutral face. Izuku ran toward his window and jumped out of it. He landed on the wall of the apartment next to his and ran up the wall. Before flipping when he reached the top of it, he perched on the ledge of the building as he peered around the city. "Crime in progress at the Tokyo Toy Museum," his suit said to him. "Got it," he said and ran along the ledge of the building. He jumped off of it and dived down. He webbed onto a street light and pulled to land on it. He then flipped off and webbed onto a building and swung, before doing a roll in the air and webbed onto the corner top of one of the buildings. He made a sharp right as he did, making his foot touch the building across the street. He let go of the web and ran along that building sideways. He twisted as he jumped once he reached the end and webbed onto the ledge of another building. He then swung from there and flipped onto the roof of another building. He ran across the building and jumped onto the next building. He kept running till he ran out of rooftop to run on and he flipped off. He saw a building with some Japanese lettering and webbed onto 2 lines and pulled. He made his body straight as he flew through the gap and webbed onto another building and swung. He kept going until he reached the area of the crime. Outside the building, he saw police officers lined around. He landed soundlessly on top of a police van and jumped off, landing next to an officer and scaring him. "Whoa, calm down, buddy. I'm here to help," Izuku said as he looked at the building. "What's happening?" he asked. "Well, inside the building there are 15 armed men trying to steal precious artifacts that date back 1,000 years. They're very valuable and an important part of our Japanese culture. We can't let them get stolen," the police officer said. Why didn't you just go in there and take them down? Izuku asked. Because they have hostages, families that wanted to see the exhibits, another officer with silver hair cut in. Oh, got ya. Just act like I'm not here. Don't raise alarm, Izuku said before jumping and webbing onto a building and pulling. He perched on the ledge of the building and spoke. Find me any sort of back doors, please. Any vents, shafts, tunnels inside the building where I can get in undetected, Izuku said, and he saw as his new high-tech suit scanned the building. There's a vent on the side of the building that you can enter in through, his suit said back to him. Cool. He jumped onto the next building and webbed to the building next to the museum. He looked at the vent and webbed onto the sides of it, pulling and launching himself at the grate and breaking it getting inside. He crawled like a spider inside the vents on all fours using only his fingers and toes to move. He reached an opening in the vent and looked down. There were 3 men in the room. They were partying looking for enemies. The other 2 men separated from the one, giving Izuku an opening to attack. He webbed the man in the middle and stuck him to the roof. Shoo, keep quiet, he said and opened the vent and climbed out. He stood upside down on the roof and watched the other 2 men. He saw the one was unprotected and webbed onto the floor and pulled, kicking him into the wall and knocking him out. He turned and webbed onto the top of one of the exhibits and pulled. He landed on top of the ancient vase soundlessly and changed the settings on his webs. He shot a ball of webs which hit the man on his side and instantly stuck him to the wall. He jumped down onto the ground and walked over to the door. He opened it and closed it slowly. He scanned the room and found 5 enemies. He shot a web ball in between 3 enemies and they got webbed to the wall. What was that? A man asked as he twisted with his gun in hand. Izuku shot a web over his mouth and webbed over to him and punched him, knocking him out. He then jumped to the last man who wasn't looking and kicked him into an exhibit. The giant picture started falling. No, 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 he said and webbed behind the picture and pulled. He made it in time to catch the picture and set it up properly. Izuku headed into the next room to find 4 men, with a few hostages. Please, a woman pleaded. Shut up. One of the men shouted. Izuku webbed onto a ledge of an exhibit and pulled. He jumped down and punched out the one guy, and kicked the next one, knocking them both out. He flipped backwards, and walked up the wall slowly to not be spotted. He used a web ball and stuck one of the guys to the wall. He changed the settings on his webs and 𝗧𝗪 webbed the last guy. He jumped down in front of the people. Are you guys alright? He said. Most nodded with smiles. Izuku smiled and webbed onto the vent and headed inside. He crawled through to the next room and looked down at the enemies. He noticed that 2 of them were talking while the other 2 gathered the exhibits. Can't take out the 2 talking, he said and got out the vent. He shot a web mine onto one of the walls. The web mine started beeping and alerted one of the 2 talking men. You hear that? The one asked. I'm gonna go check that out, he said and turned the corner, only to get webbed to the wall by the web mine. Hey, you alright back there? The other man asked. He went to go check it out behind the corner. Izuku jumped down and kicked the man into the wall. Spider-Man twisted his body and webbed onto the wall and pulled. He landed onto the wall and flipped off, punching one of the leftover men in the face. What? The other one asked as he spotted Izuku. Night-night, he said and webbed onto the roof and swing-kicked the man into the wall. Izuku nodded and went out the door of the museum. It's clear, he said as the civilians ran out behind him. Thank you, the officer said. Can I ask for your hero license, the officer said. Well actually, Izuku said and jumped off. Next day Izuku was dressed for his first day at UA. He put his tie up to his neck and put his blazer over him. Izuku, his mom said as she entered his room. Izuku turned around and smiled at her. You look so smart in your school uniform, she said with a smile. Well, I'd better head out. I love you, Mom, he said and grabbed his bag. He ran out the room and down the stairs to catch the train. He rode the train till he reached the UA gates. He walked over to his classroom and opened the huge doors. When he entered, his classmates gave him different looks. 𝗂𝐴 nerd. Izuku heard a familiar shout. What the hell is all that about? Appearing on the news as a hero, Bakugo shouted at him. Everybody immediately recognized him as Izuku Midoriya. The kid who rescued 30 people from 2 pro-villains. You're that guy from the news, a guy with a tail said. Wow, really is he? A pink girl asked. Yeah, he is, it's all over Japan, a guy with a bird head said. Man, we have a hero in our class, a guy with a lightning bolt in his hair said. All right, all of you shut it, a voice said. Izuku turned around and looked down to see a man in a sleeping bag. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏, he said with sparks in his eyes. So you know my hero name, the guy said as he crawled out the sleeping bag. Of course, I used to study heroes when I was younger, Izuku said. Fanboying over 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏. Your quirk is to take away others' quirks, right? 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 sighed as he pointed to Izuku's seat. Sit down and shut up, he said emotionlessly. Izuku did as told and sat down. Now I'm your homeroom teacher. You may call me Mr. Aizawa. And welcome to UA. Now, put on these PE uniforms and shove off to the main field. We're doing a quirk apprehension test, he said and began to walk out the room. But what about the assembly in the hall? A girl with black spiky hair and big melons, for her age, asked. We're heroes, we don't have time for that nonsense, he said and walked off. Izuku picked up his uniform and walked over to the window before jumping out. What the? A small guy with purple hair yelled. Everyone ran to the window to see Izuku walking down the side of the building as if it was normal. The purple-haired guy fainted from seeing that. What a strange guy, a guy with glasses and blue hair said. Izuku got to the training ground and looked around as his classmates arrived slowly. First things first. Today, we're gonna work on basic exercises that I'm sure you all know about. Standing long jump, endurance running. These are all exercises that you know from your old schools. But the difference is that you weren't allowed to use your quirks right. Well, the script has been flipped. Here, you can go wild with your quirk. Izuku, he said staring at the boy. In middle school, how far could you throw a ball? Aizawa said. 67 meters, he said. Not bad, so you could already throw it pretty far. But this time, use your quirk to throw the ball. Do anything, 'cause anything flies here at you, he said and threw the ball at Izuku from behind his head. His spider sense tingled and told him to lift his hand behind him, so he did and he caught the ball perfectly without even looking. This surprised a few, but most didn't think much of it. Izuku reeled back his hand and threw the ball and waited for it to get far enough. Before webbing it and swinging it around and released. Aizawa's phone beeped and he nodded in respect. Not too shabby, he said and showed the phone to Izuku and everyone. It read 11:23 m. Izuku fist pumped and jumped into the air. Bakugo looked at his happiness and felt enraged. He activated his quirk and dashed toward him with a snarl. Deku! He yelled and was about to explode Izuku's back. But he found himself fall over and roll when his quirk deactivated itself. He looked at his hand and tried to use his quirk, but still nothing. Don't make me overuse my quirk, damn it. I've got bad eyes, Aizawa said as his eyes were red and his hair flowed up a bit. Now, let's continue with the exercise, he said and turned to log the scores. This might actually be fun, an invisible girl said. Fun, hey, here at UE, we're trying to mold you to be model heroes. No, have fun. So how's this? The person that comes last will be expelled. This will push you all to try your hardest. Now remember these words because they'll count in future. Plus ultra, Aizawa said with a smirk playing on his lips. Everyone tensed up as they watched Aizawa call them all to begin the first activity. Later, Izuku and the rest of the guys were getting changed and was buttoning up his shirt when his phone buzzed. He picked it up and saw the contact's name that texted him. You have one unread text from Paige Jane was what his phone read. He unlocked his phone and read the message. Swing on by once you're done with school. We've got a project to work on, was what the message read. He nodded and acknowledged the message before getting fully changed. Instead of putting his blazer back on, he hooked the loop of it around his finger and slung in over his shoulder. He walked toward his classroom and opened the door before closing it. The people who were actually there turned to look at him, a bit surprised. The girl who was pink, Mina, was what he thought her name was staring at him, and so was the frog girl. His blazer hid most of his muscle, but now that he didn't have it on, they saw that his school shirt wasn't all that big and it basically hugged onto his body, showing as his muscle and abs in all its glory. It's like when All Might wears a suit and tie, they were similar. Izuku walked over to his seat and pulled his phone out again. He texted Paige back as the rest of his classmates arrived. All the girls headed to one corner to talk while the guys just stayed where they were and talked. Everyone from this morning was still present cause it turned out that Mr. Aizawa was lying about the expulsion thing. The girls were talking and staring at Izuku while they spoke. Izuku pressed send on his message and smiled at Paige's picture on his phone. "Oh Midoriya." A voice called. Izuku turned to look at Ishido smiling and having from across the class. "Can you please move my desk slightly? It's way too heavy for me," she said. "Sure," he said and stood. He walked over and lifted the desk easily. His muscles moved in all the right ways to make some of the girls blush. "Don't get why you wanted the desk moved, but there, it's all done," he said with a bright smile at the end. "No reason," Ishido said. Izuku turned and walked back to his seat. All the guys stared at Izuku as if he was a dumbass, but he acted like he didn't notice. Izuku wasn't a fool. He knew what the girls were playing at and he just decided to play along. He sat down as Aizawa walked in. "Well, time to continue with school," he said, and some booed. Everyone except Izuku. He knew that everything learned here would help. Some wondered why they had to learn English and math to become a hero. But Izuku knew that, as outrageous it sounds, there might be a math villains out there. That and that if the hero career didn't work out, they could get normal jobs. So he was completely fine and content with learning. Later Izuku walked out the school building and walked out the gates of UA. His first day of school over. He headed home and changed first before heading over to Nara Labs. Once there, he placed his lab coat on before heading into the testing area where he saw Paige. "Hey Paige," he said the lab. Izuku looked around the lab and saw that only him, Ben and Paige were there. "What's going on?" he asked. "Sit down please Izuku," Paige said, trying to act formal. Izuku sat down on one of the chairs in the room while Ben stared at him with a hint of anger. "I brought you both here to discuss your behavior," Paige said as she now also sat down. But she was sitting on a table. "This is what Paige looks like, by the way. Our behavior." "I'm sorry, what behavior?" Izuku asked, leaning forward a bit. "Yeah, what behavior?" Ben asked. "That fact that you have none. Every time you're in the same room as each other, you always look at each other angrily. And that's not a good workplace environment," she said and smiled. "And it's gotten so bad that the big man upstairs has noticed," she said and pointed up. "God?" Izuku asked, playing dumb just to annoy her a bit. "No, the CO, this is the main building where Nara Labs works." "So obviously, thus is where the CO works," she said and shook her head. Ben chuckled a little, noticing that Izuku was acting dumb. "See in horseplay," she said and smiled a little. This was supposed to be a serious moment, but she also saw the humor in what Izuku said. "Horseplay? We haven't played with any horses," they said. Paige face-palmed and tried not to laugh. "Ben, last week, you put chemicals in Izuku's coffee to make his teeth all the colors of the rainbow," Paige said and smiled a little. "That was you," Izuku exclaimed and pointed at Ben. "Don't act like you didn't know Izuku. You got him back by rigging the lightest W in his office to zap him every time he touched it," Paige said, and her smile widened. "I remember that day," Ben said and chuckled as held his hand. "And that leads me to why I brought you here. You two will be working on a project together. Ben here is trying to create mind-controlled devices. But he's having trouble with the circuitry. That's where Izuku comes in. Ben working on the biological aspect, Izuku, the mechanical. And I bet you could teach each other a thing or two," she said with a smile. "Me work with him," Ben said, feeling outraged. "What about Ronnie? He knows mechanics. Why can't he come here and help instead of him?" Ben said, standing up. "Because I said so," Paige said and stood and began walking toward the door. "You best get started. This thing needs to be presented in 3 weeks," she said and left. "That's not enough time." Ben yelled. "𝐷𝗵𝗏. He yelled and turned to look at Izuku. "Listen, I don't like you." "That couldn't be any more obvious," Izuku interrupted. "But we have to work together," he said. "Okay, so what's this project you're working on?" Izuku asked. Ben walked over to a tarp in the back on the room on a table and switched on the lamp before pulling the tarp off. Under the tarp was a bunch of teeny tiny black ball. "Nanotechnology," Ben said. Whoa, nanotech needs an interneuron link, which is hard to do. Not to mention that it could potentially fry you brain, Izuku said. Unless it's been given set commands instead of mind controlling it, he continued. Listen, I already know that interneuron link is dangerous and that it could fry my brain. But if it works, think about the possibility of our race evolving, Ben said and smiled. I think we should go with the safer option of giving them automated orders, Izuku said. Not only that, but the nanostructures in your body could get messed up, Izuku continued. Listen, if you don't want to help, there's the door, Ben said and pointed toward the door. Just think, Ben, this could kill us both because of the nanopollutants that this kind of procedure takes, Izuku said. I know that, Ben said and looked at the nanobots. Then why attempt? Izuku asked. Listen, either you held or not, because I'm doing this anyway, Ben said with a bit of a snarl. Fine, but we need to wear masks. I'm not too fond on being killed by nanoparticles, he said and looked at Ben. So, let's revolutionize the world. Izuku looked on ahead at the board in the classroom, trying his hardest not to fall asleep. Him and Ben had been working on this nanobots thing for about a week and a half now, and they had barely done anything. They tried all sorts of ideas, but all of them had a problem. Izuku didn't want to admit it, but he was slowly losing hope for this project. He was beginning to nod off to sleep when he suddenly felt a piece of paper hit the back of his head. The paper shocked him awake instantly. He turned to see Uraraka giving a glare to stay awake. Well, trying to give a glare and failing. She was just too kind for that. Izuku looked forward as English class ended and the teacher left. It was 5 minutes till the next teacher arrived. I have arrived, he yelled as he entered the room. Yes, with all might here, I'll never be able to doze off, Izuku thought and put on a tired smile. Today, we shall be commencing in a trail of battle. Get your hero suits on and meet me outside, so I can lead you to the testing area. All Might said and left the room marching out. Everyone cheered, they were finally doing something interesting. Later Izuku looked at himself in the bathroom mirror wearing his SpiderIzuku costume. He noticed the bags under his eyes and splashed water onto his face, before putting the face mask over and switching it on. Luckily, it hid his bags and made him look less tired. Izuku walked out of the bathroom and into the middle of the field. Feeling his wrists, he walked up and stood by everyone else. They all turned to look at his suit. Wow, your suit looks really manly, Kirashima said with a fist pump. Thanks, Izuku said with an eye smile. This is the suit you used to save all those people, Ishido said, fangirling over the suit. Yep, was Izuku's reply. The rest of the class started discussing about what they would be doing, until All Might arrived. Hello little golden eggs. Follow me to the testing site, he said. Everyone followed him and they picked lots on who was on whose team. They got paired as Canon Izuku looked at Uraraka with emotionless eyes. She looked at him kinda scared from the cold look she was getting, but blushed when his face suddenly flooded with emotion and he gave a bright eye smile. He removed his mouthpiece and let it hang on one side before saying, "Let's kick some butt." She fist pumped and smiled at his expression. First matchup will be Izuku and Uraraka as heroes and Bakugo and young Ida as villains, All Might said as one of his eyes twinkled on his darkly lightened face. Izuku yawned and headed off with Uraraka trailing behind slowly. They stopped outside a window to strategize. Kaken is gonna come after me, so you will head off to get Ida. I'll try take down Kaken as quick as possible to come help, he said and she nodded. He gave a thumbs up before flipping inside and landing soundlessly. Uraraka, not so much. She made herself float and slowly drifted inside and disabled her quirk, making her land and hit her face with a loud oof. Izuku face-palmed. He helped the young heroine up before they made their way down the narrow hallways. If this is gonna be a close-quarters fight, then I can win. I thrive in close-quarters fights, he thought as his spider sense went off and he flipped backwards over Uraraka's head and webbed onto her back to pull her with him. An explosion came from around the corner as he did, destroying the rock and leaving bits of concrete dust in the air. Izuku stared forward into the dust as he caught Uraraka in his arms. She blushed a little and got serious. Activate your quirk on yourself, he whispered and she obeyed. He then threw her lightly in the air. Bakugo came with a sinister smile on his face. Uraraka quietly drifted past him, over his head. "Kaken," was all Midoriya said and nodded. "Shitner, Deku," he replied. The concrete bits were slowly dropping to the ground. The wall that Bakugo exploded had a few bits of brick that were starting to fall as well. Once the first piece hit the floor, they commenced in their battle, almost as if the piece were a battle horn. Izuku webbed onto the roof as Bakugo sent an explosion to his legs. He swung and kicked Bakugo in the chest with both legs, then, straight after, he webbed past the other male's head and pulled, giving him a devastating kick to the head. The people watching from the command room winced when they saw it. Deku flipped backwards and landed on the roof. Bakugo stood and wiped blood from his nose. "That's it, you're dead," he yelled and shot an explosion at Deku. The spider flipped off the roof and webbed onto a wall at the back of the hall and pulled. He slid across the floor and tripped Bakugo as he did. Bakugo used the momentum to flip and grab Izuku's suit and slammed him into the ground using explosions. He used a punch with explosions to punch him and cause his head to break through the ground. Izuku fell through into the basement of the building, but pulled Bakugo down with him. He webbed onto Bakugo's hair and pulled, making him smack his head against the floor. The boy winced, but quickly recovered as he used his explosions to flip to his feet and slam both fists into Izuku's torso. Izuku's eyes flew open. Wide as he twisted on the ground and kicked Bakugo into the air. He webbed onto the roof and pulled, effectively kicking Bakugo through the roof, onto the floor that they were previously on. He once again did it as he kicked Bakugo through the window. Bakugo pulled the pin out of his wrist grenades and pointed at Izuku as he fell. With Izuku's quick reflexes, he webbed the hole where the explosion was to come out. But that did little to no help as the explosion hit him head-on. "Bakugo, you'll kill him!" All Might yelled through the comm, but Bakugo didn't listen, and even if he did listen, it was too late. The explosion could already be seen through the barrel of the machine. He covered his body to protect him. Through the explosion, a black figure of Izuku's could be seen curled up amidst the explosion. Once Bakugo hit the ground, the explosion stopped and Izuku came down and punched him across the face. Izuku's suit protected from most of the blast. Not to say that it didn't hurt. His top half of the suit was almost completely blown off. His mouthpiece was still intact, his chest had scratch marks on it, and his bottom half of the suit had areas where you could see his bleeding skin. His hair was completely just everywhere with how messy it was. But his eyes still held that determination to win. Bakugo looked at Izuku with a shocked expression. Izuku turned with his eyes glowing a brilliant green light. Like a star, sort of. He stepped forward and punched. The punch didn't make contact with Bakugo, but he got sent back by the wind pressure alone. He flew back 2 blocks in the fake city before stopping himself. Izuku looked at Bakugo from afar, and suddenly he wasn't so far. In a split second, Izuku was in front of him, ready to deliver another punch. When suddenly he stopped, like he had shut down. Or, Izuku was sleeping on his feet. He fell over as Bakugo stared at him confused, but didn't question as he wrapped the capture tape around his hands. He used explosions to make it back to the building when heroes win. All Might yelled through the comm. Uraraka jumped off of the top of the rocket-shaped nuke. "Good job, Uraraka," Iida said. Uraraka smiled and wiped the sweat off her brow. "Couldn't have done it if not for Izuku," she said. Iida looked at her confused. A few minutes ago Izuku punched, knocking Bakugo back and shaking the building. Uraraka saw this as Izuku helping, and while Iida was off balance, she sprinted and touched every rock created by their fight. Then Izuku bolted toward Bakugo, creating another shockwave which shook the building once more. Uraraka looked at a now half-broken pillar. She kicked it as she felt a sting in her leg when she did. She ignored the pain and used her gravity to make it light before swinging it. She knocked all the rocks at Iida, who started kicking the rocks, breaking them to pieces. She then took the chance to throw the whole pillar at him. He caught it, but with both his hands occupied, Uraraka ran and jumped to hug the bomb. Present Uraraka smiled at her handiwork as she made her way down the stairs of the building, to get outside, only to find Izuku had done so much more. The street he had knocked Bakugo back on was destroyed. Broken walls, windows, street lights, poles, fences, uprooted trees. The grass got blown away and now only dirt remained. She marveled at what her partner had done. Well, what she thought he had done. She hoped that he did this instead of Bakugo. Because if Bakugo had done it, that would mean Izuku was hurt. She ran down the road to him and found him sleeping soundlessly. All Might appeared and picked him up for Uraraka, knowing the girl might struggle a bit. They both walked back to the testing area. Uraraka kept stealing glances at Izuku with a worried expression the whole time. "He'll be fine, don't worry about him," All Might said, staring forward. "He's a strong one," All Might continued, and Uraraka smiled at her sleeping partner. The pro hero dropped Izuku off with Recovery Girl and left. Later, Izuku woke up and winced as he looked at the ointment on his burns. "I probably shouldn't move much," he said as he laid back down and stared out the window at the setting sun. It was majestic and so upbeat that it made Izuku smile. He closed his eyes until he suddenly heard a knock by the door. "Uraraka?" he questioned as the door slid open. "Try again," All Might said as he entered. "We need to talk." All Might stared deeply at Izuku, as if he were staring into the boy's soul. "So, what do you want to talk about?" Izuku asked as he looked away. "What you did today, and at the entrance exam. Do you know what you did?" he questioned with a serious expression, no joking in his tone. Izuku turned to look at him and said, "Yeah, what about it?" he asked, and steam rose from All Might's body, as he slowly transformed into a slimmer, bony version of himself. Izuku raised an eyebrow at the sudden transformation. "I am made of questions right now," he said as he sat up and looked at All Might. "I know you are, but I am too," he said in a normal tone, his voice losing its once manly edge to it. "Geez, his ball left with his form, I guess," Izuku thought as All Might sighed. "What about it is that it's my quirk." "One for all," the pro said as he stared at his feet. "Let me give you a little history lesson. The power you used is called One for All, a very powerful power that has been passed down from person to person. I wondered why I couldn't use my quirk for much longer now. You see, originally I could only use my quirk for 3 hours before I became like this. But lately that time has been slowly deteriorating and now I'm down to in 1.5 hours that I can stay buff. It started deteriorating about 11 months ago, and from background checks of you, it seems you seem to get your quirk 11 months ago. Coincidence? I think not. You see, as I said, One for All, or OFA for short, is passed down from person to person, and the only way to receive the power would be if the user accepts the power. Think of it this way, if I give you a present that you don't like, what will you do?" All Might questioned. "I would give it back," Midoriya said. "Exactly, OFA can only be passed down if the user accepts it. And the next recipient must have digested a piece of DNA from the previous user." All Might stood and walked over to the window to look out of it. "Then how did I get it?" Izuku asked as he turned to face the pro. "Well, I lie, the DNA doesn't exactly have to be digested, it just needs to be inputted into the body of the recipient. It can be put in any way, injection, a tablet, or digested, however you can put it in. Which does raise the question. How did you get it?" "Me and you haven't been in direct contact until a few hours ago when I carried you here, and even so, the quirk can't be transferred through skin contact, plus I had it before you carried me here," Izuku said and put a hand to his chin, using his smart, scientist brain to figure out how it happened. "Yeah, you catch on quick. You're smart. Which brings me to a theory that I've had for some time now. I knew your father, his name was Hayashi Midoriya, and me and your father worked on a project a few years back. It was to see if we could give quirks to the quirkless. Now the test ended up going all wrong to the point where your father died," All Might said as a tear escaped his eye. He quickly wiped it off as he continued. "He tried science as a means to create a quirk, but it failed. Then one day after I fought a really bad villain called All for One, he scarred me. So now, my quirk doesn't work properly and I have a specific amount of time to be a hero before I become like this," he said and turned to see Midoriya's expression. Izuku was crying now. He looked at his hands and they were trembling. "The symbol of peace is disappearing, and it's all my fault," Izuku said and put his hands onto his face. All Might walked over to Izuku and put a hand on his shoulder. I should have known not to be so serious. He's just a kid after all, All Might thought as he smiled at Izuku. It's not your fault. It's all for one's fault. He injured me, causing my hero timeouts. All Might looked into Midoriya's eyes and smiled wider. Now, let me ask the question, how did you get your spider quirk? All Might asked, trying to prove if his theory was correct. I got it when I got bitten by a spider in a lab, and your picture was in the lab with my dad, Izuku said as wiped his stray tears. Just as I thought. It seems one spider survived. The experiment was meant to give quirks to the quirkless, but like I said, it didn't work out well. And your father used my DNA and said spiders because I could pass on my quirk. And with that ability, he thought that if the spider had bitten someone, the person could get the abilities of the spider. We created 10 spiders like that. You must have gotten one of the more common ones, since there were spiders who could grant invisibility and others that caused taser hands. You kind of fell short there, All Might said and chuckled. I could have gotten invisibility. No fair man. Now someone else can get that ability by getting bitten by the spider, Izuku said with depressed face. All Might began laughing at his expression. No, all the other spiders are dead. And the spider can only pass the ability on once. Then it just becomes a normal spider. But I think that's how you got my quirk. You took in my DNA, which must have given you my quirk. But it seems that it's emotion-based, which is bad. If you would like, I could train you on using it. Izuku stared at All Might contemplating his offer. And as much as he'd like to jump and say, yes, he couldn't. He had too much going on now. I'm sorry All Might, but I've got stuff going on now. I recently took up a project that's gonna take up a lot of time. And I've got my mother to look after, then there's homework and school projects, then there's training my spider quirk. I've got a full plate and I don't know if I can eat it all, Midoriya said. All Might's smile dropped slightly when he said that. Then, let me help you eat that plate of food. And I'm sure there are others that can help you eat that plate of food. Rely on others, Midoriya. All Might stood and looked out the window, noticing that they'd been talking for so long that it was now dark out. Anyways, I'm leaving now. Here's my number and address, in case you want to ask any questions about your father. You really do look like him. Oh, and there's this, he said and handed Izuku a USB. There's a video labeled, My Son. Watch it, All Might said. Don't worry, I didn't see it. Then the pro left. Izuku pocketed the USB. I should get to the lab, he said inside. He picked up his phone to check the time and noticed that the option to choose connect to the school's Wi-Fi was there. If I could, I would, but there's a password, he said, and suddenly an idea came to mind. Now I definitely have to go to the lab. He yelled as he quickly put clothes on and ran out the room. He ran toward the train station and waited for a train to take him to Nara Labs. He ran out the train as soon as it arrived and bolted toward the big skyscraper. He ran through the doors with a happy smile and made it to Ben's lab. Ben, I've had a breakthrough. He yelled and Ben turned in his chair to look at Izuku. What kind of breakthrough? And where were you? You were supposed to arrive an hour ago to start working on this, Ben said as he turned to face the device he was working on. A breakthrough on how to control the nanobots, he said and shook his hands with a smile. All right, let me hear it, he said as he placed the tools down and looked at Izuku. Oh, okay. So, I was at school and I was just leaving the school nurse's office and a notification came up on my phone to connect to my school's Wi-Fi, he said and his smile grew wider. Get to the point now, Izuku, Ben said and yawned. Ben also had bags under his eyes from overworking himself. We mix yours and my idea. I wanted an automated system. You wanted mind control. We'll meet in the middle. We'll make at least 5 Wi-Fi ball. We'll have one of the nanobots read and it will act like Wi-Fi. We give that one orders, and that one gives the rest of them orders. Izuku was hopping up and down at his idea. Izuku, you're a genius, Ben said and stood up. He started chuckling as him and Izuku walked toward each other. They hugged and hopped up and down. Wait, what are we doing? Izuku questioned as they stopped hopping. A voice came from the door. I was wondering the same thing, Paige said as she smirked. Izuku and Ben immediately let go of each other. I see you guys must have had a breakthrough, Paige said, still with that smirk playing on her lips. Izuku smiled and blushed with an embarrassed look on his face. Ben seemed to clear his throat and look away. Good idea, Izuku, Ben said and stuck out his hand for a handshake. Izuku's blush immediately disappeared and he looked at Ben's hand. Had he finally won Ben over? He smiled and shook the older male's hand. Paige smiled to herself at the scene. Izuku's eyes sparkled with happiness at Ben's acceptance. Now, let's get to work, partner, Ben said and sat back down. He called me partner, Izuku thought, and looked at Paige and pointed at Ben with a goofy smile. Izuku walked over to her and he spun her around before kissing her passionately. What was that for? She asked. Because I love you. But I gotta get to work, he said and gave her a quick peck before leaving. Tomorrow night. Date, he said and ran off. Paige waved at Izuku as he ran off to go work. Later Ben and Izuku split up on the work. Ben worked on the interneuron machine that would be connected to the neck of the user, and Izuku worked on this Wi-Fi ball he talked about. It was now 22:34 at night and the two were still hard at work. Until thump collision. Ben turned to see Izuku asleep at the desk he was working on and saw two red Wi-Fi ball and a half-finished one. Hey! He stopped when he saw how peaceful Izuku looked as he slept. He had his face squashed up against the desk and a little trail of drool came out of his mouth as he snored a little. His chest moved up and down rhythmically. Fine. Sleep, you've earned it. Izuku woke up at midnight and looked to see Ben sound asleep. He nodded and stood up slowly. He crept out the room and went to the bathroom. There were still scientists at work in the building at this time. Talk about dedication, Izuku murmured as he entered the bathroom and saw his bag webbed to the roof. Luckily, the roof of the men's bathroom was high, and there was no reason for anyone to look up. Izuku jumped and put his hand onto the roof and hung there. He used his free hand to first scratch his head, then to unzip the bag and pull out the Spider-Man suit. Once he had the suit in hand, he was about to drop down, so I told her, "No, I don't want to have children," and she got mad at me, a scientist said as he and his buddy entered the room. Izuku was hanging from two sticky fingers on the roof. Please use the cubicle, he thought as sweat ran down his face. He might be Spider-Man, but this was difficult. Especially with the added weight of his suit. And the worst part was that he was relying on the tips of two fingers not to get caught. Yeah, but that is kinda mean, the scientist's friend said. No, it's not. If I'm not ready for kids yet, then she needs to deal with it, the guy said as they walked over to the urinal. You don't say that to your wife, the guy said, and Izuku would have normally agreed with him. But he was in a real pickle now. The sweat from holding onto the roof with two fingers was all over his fingers, and he wasn't sure how long he had. The two men started pissing while having their conversation, leaving one urinal space apart and not looking up at all. "'Cause dem's the rules of urinals." Izuku made sure not to look as he closed his eyes when they approached said urinals. After they were done pissing, the urinal automatically flushed itself and they went to wash their hands. "How is it wrong though?" the man asked as he leaned against the wall. "It just is," the other guy said. Izuku looked up and noticed how his grip was slipping. He was losing grip and fast. He wanted nothing more than to shout at them to get out the bathroom. But he couldn't. His one finger slipped. And now he only had the grip of one. His face twisted into a pain-filled one as he tried his hardest to stay up. "Bro, I thought you'd back me up on this," the guy said as he stood properly. "And why would I do that?" the man questioned. "Because we're buddies," he said back as they both started walking out. Izuku dropped down with a red face as he wiped the sweat off his brow. He quickly suited up and left the building, running to the top of it and perching on the edge of it to get a good view of the city. It was appealing this time of night. Lots of lights, coming together to form a second night sky in front of him. It was kinda peaceful. "We have a report of a car full of drags headed past 𝗔𝗂𝗁𝗂𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏," a female police officer's voice said. Izuku had connected his suit to the police scanner to hear all crimes happening in his city. He thought that this situation didn't need a hero, but something could go wrong. He hopped off the roof and began to dive down toward the ground. He webbed to a building and began his way to the runaway drag car. As he got closer, he watched the car as it swerved and made turns while skidding across the roads. "I don't think this crime needs me," he said as a man stuck his head out the window and started shooting at the police. One of the bullets hit the police car and it started swerving dangerously, until it hit another police car and the car flipped. As soon as Izuku saw the police car swerve, he had guessed what was gonna happen. He ran and jumped to the next building before dropping down and landing where the car was gonna land on its roof. He landed and caught the car while bending backward. "You guys okay?" he asked, and the officers gave a thumbs up upside down. Izuku gently placed the car down and then jumped up the building and ran up it, doing a flip once he reached the end on the outer wall and landing on a vent. Perched and looking at the car as more men stuck their guns out the window. He immediately rushed in and kicked a cop car so that the driver wouldn't be hit by the bullet. He flipped off the car, effectively dodging the bullet himself. He webbed and swung toward the car and landed onto the roof of it. He moved to the side and stood on the side of the car, crouched. One of the guys stuck half his body out the window and his hands became metal. He tried to punch Izuku, but Izuku dodged and pulled him out the car and webbed him in a cocoon hanging from a power line. He flipped to the other side of the car and did the same, till there was only 2 guys left. He jumped away from car's passenger window, before webbing onto the sides of said passenger window and pulling. He swiftly smashed through the window of the car on the driver's side and kicked him out the car through the window at the passenger seat. Then he webbed and swung in front of the car and pulled, landing in front of the vehicle. This might hurt, he thought, as the car rammed into him. Still moving at top speeds, he kept both his feet firm on the ground as the car slowed down. He lifted the car a little bit as he stopped it and put it down, panting after it had stopped. He panted and placed both hands on his knees and walked over to the door where the last member was left. He was about to open the door when the car door flew off its hinges and smacked him into the car parked behind him. The person in the car got out with yellow electricity streaming around him. He was bald with a snarl capable of scaring babies. He had on a green jacket and pants. The jacket he wore looked high-tech and he started to float. "So you're the so-called Spider-Man I've heard about," he said as the electricity streamed around him. "And you must be One Punch Man," Izuku said as he shook his head from the pain. He then flipped onto the roof of the car behind him. "One Punch, no, the name's Electro. And you do well to remember that," the guy said and flew closer to Izuku. "So, what I'm getting from this is that you're not One Punch Man?" Izuku questioned and tilted his head to the side. Electro growled as he shot a stream of electricity at him. Izuku flipped off the car as the car got knocked into the building behind it. "So Electro, you like jokes?" Izuku asked as he webbed onto the wall behind him and pulled. He flew and landed crouching on the wall. Electro shot more electricity, but Izuku once again dodged and webbed onto the next building. "I got a good joke for ya, it's got a good punchline," he said as he jumped and punched Electro across the face. Electro twisted in the air for a bit as Izuku fell past him, giving Izuku enough time to web onto the building behind Electro and pull to give a devastating double kick to Electro into said building. He flew and smacked into the building. Izuku came back and punched Electro once more. "Ha!" he yelled as he exploded with electricity, knocking Izuku back into a nearby car. Izuku looked up, dazed, seeing stars in his vision. Electro took the chance to shoot electricity at him with a snarl. The electricity hit and shocked Izuku, making him fidget around, but at the same time it lifted him above the ground. Izuku floated toward Electro slowly. "Die," Electro said as he smacked Izuku into a building. If I had a yen for every time as someone told me to die, I'd be rich," Izuku said as he got shocked. The spark plug grabbed Izuku by his neck and rammed Spider-Man against the building and pushed him up the building wall, breaking the brick as he did, until there was no more wall and Electro threw Izuku onto the roof of the building. He landed with a thud on the roof and got ready as Electro made his way toward him by flying. As soon as Electro appeared, Izuku ran and punched him. The man was about to fly away, before Izuku grabbed his leg and pulling him down toward off the side of the building. He dived down and slammed the villain into a car, webbing onto a building once he noticed how close to the ground he was getting. He pulled, sliding at a dangerous 2 inches above the ground. Then he pulled upwards. During the process, Electro got up and floated in front of Izuku. Still dazed from being smashed into a car, he didn't notice Izuku coming in to deliver a double kick, sending the overgrown battery into the building wall behind him, then webbing onto the top two edges of the building and pulled. He planted both feet onto Electro's chest as he forced the man into the brick as the flew up the building, breaking the brick as he flew upwards. Once near the top, he had both feet on Electro's chest. He pushed off and knocked the man through onto the wall of the building. Izuku followed after, hopping into the hole he had created and landing on Electro's chest. Inside the room they were in, there was a family of black people cowering by the door. Izuku turned his head to see them and realized, "Can't let the public get hurt." He grabbed Electro by his jacket and jumped toward the hole he created, jumping through it and dragging Electro with him. They were now back on the street that they were on before. Izuku landed on the roof of a car and broke it. He rolled off the roof in pain as Electro floated above him. "That's it," he yelled as he made Izuku float with electricity. "I'm gonna fry ya," he yelled. Izuku squirmed as he felt the pain moving throughout his whole body. Think he thought, then got an idea. He changed the web mode on his suit and shot the taser webs onto the floor. The electricity that Electro was shocking him with went through the webs and onto the floor. Like a conductor, the pain from being shocked disappeared. The retarded lightning bolt looked confused, giving Izuku enough to web onto him and pull, flying over to him as he punched Electro across the face. Electro flew back and Izuku continued, launching a barrage of attacks, till the man was knocked out when he swung a trash can and hit him over the head with it. The police arrived after and put court-canceling cuffs on the man. Izuku sighed as he flipped onto the roof of a building. "This city's becoming overrun with weird villains," he said before swinging off. Later Izuku arrived at Nara Labs after school and found Paige. "Hey," he said and hugged her from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist as she held her tablet and tried to work. "Not in public, Izuku," she said as she blushed. Izuku chuckled and kissed her on the cheek. "Ready for dinner tonight?" he asked as he let go of her waist and walked around her. "Where's it gonna be?" she asked as she placed her tablet down. "At your penthouse," he said with a grin. "Oh, really now?" she said and leaned in closer to him. "Yeah, really," he said and smiled seductively. She returned the smile with her own stuck smile. "See you there then," she said and picked up her tablet before walking off. "I'll see you there," he said with a smirk as she walked off. Izuku turned to see her appealing hourglass figure walking away. Later Izuku had it all set up, the food, the table, the lighting, the flowers he was gonna give her. It seemed perfect. Then he heard the door unlocking. "Time to get into position," he said and walked over toward the door. Paige opened the door then locked it behind her, finally turning to see the display and Izuku behind her. "Hello, milady, right this way," he said and stuck out his hand. "Oh, nice." "Thank you, gentlemen," she said and took his hand. They walked together toward the candle-lit dinner on her balcony. "I thought that a star like you deserves to be with other stars." "Kinda cheesy, I know," he said and smiled. Paige giggled a little and blushed. "I think it's sweet," she said and Izuku pulled her chair out for her. She sat down with a smile and Izuku brought out their food. "First off we have the katsudon, then a platter of sushi, then for dessert, chocolate mousse," he said and brought the katsudon. They both sat down and Izuku started eating, but Paige didn't eat at all. She just kept looking around with a deep-seated blush on her face. Izuku noticed and decided to ask, "What's wrong? You don't like it?" he asked concerned. "No, it's not that, it's just," she said and trailed off with her blush intensifying. "Just what?" he asked and leaned back a bit. "Just that I was hoping that we could skip to dessert," she said still with her blush. "Dessert or dessert?" he questioned with a smirk. Dessert, she said with rosy cheeks as she pulled a tiny piece of plastic out her pocket. Once Izuku saw the plastic thing, he knew what it was. "Okay then," he said. "Okay then," she said back and Izuku stood. He walked around the table and pulled Paige's chair out and turned it to face him. He started kissing her passionately. He slipped his tongue into her mouth as they kissed, and she did the same. They were now having a battle with their tongues and they were both enjoying every second of it. Izuku lifted Paige up under her thighs and walked inside. She instinctively wrapped her legs around his waist. He walked to her bedroom and placed her down on the bed. He moved back and took off his shirt, revealing his toned body. She pulled him in for another kiss as he climbed on top of her. They continued kissing till they separated for air. "Are we gonna do this?" Paige asked, gasping for air. "Only if you want to," he said, and she nodded. "I want to," she said with a red face. "I want to too," he said with his own tint of red. They continued on kissing, and the kissing led on to more things. And I won't describe what happened, but yes. They had section. Izuku yawned as he felt someone clinging to his chest. He opened his eyes slowly and turned his head to see Paige with her arms wrapped around his chest. He chest pressed up against his, her face peaceful. Izuku smiled and kissed her on the forehead. He turned his body a little so he wouldn't wake up the blonde sleeping next to him. He picked up his phone on the bedside table and looked at the time. 6:10 was the time. "Man, I better get ready for school," he said and looked at Paige. "But I don't want to leave. It'll be fine if I don't show up for school, right? I'll bluff, tell Mom I'm sick and stay here all day with Paige. She can call in sick too," he said as he played with her golden hair. He looked at her face and smiled. "Can't believe I'm dating such appealing women," he said and looked at the ceiling. "And we did the thing last night," he said and blushed a little. "I love her so much, it's not even funny," he said and closed his eyes to doze off again after placing his phone under the pillow. He woke up to the smell of something frying in the kitchen. He got up and made his way over there and saw Paige making eggs and bacon with some pancakes. He walked up behind her and hugged her from behind, placing his head gently on her shoulder as he wrapped his arms around her slender waist. Then kissed her neck repeatedly, making her a little. He stopped and smiled, satisfied that he had gotten the reaction that he wanted. "Don't tease me like that," she said with a blush. Izuku chuckled and let go of her. He stepped back and hopped up to sit on the island in the middle of the kitchen. He sat back and admired her figure, her curves all put in the right places. And he saw all that last night. He chuckled at last night. Paige reached for her top cabinet on her toes, trying to reach it. Izuku shot a web onto it and pulled it open. Paige turned to face him and he shrugged. "Show off," she said and stuck her tongue out. Paige reached for 2 plates, but Izuku webbed onto those and pulled them out as well. Paige turned to face him with a tick mark on her forehead. Izuku smiled with his eyes closed though, so he didn't notice. Paige soon found herself giggling at Izuku's facial expression. She put their breakfast onto plates and sat next to Izuku on the island. She had a fork in hand and was ready to eat when Izuku stole her plate. "What are you doing?" she asked, surprised. "Say he said, and she looked at him with eyes that said, "Seriously?" and Izuku answered with a, "Yes, seriously," and she opened her mouth. Izuku was about to place the food in his mouth when he instead slammed his lips against hers. They kissed with their tongues traveling in each other's mouths. Paige soon started to lean back until her back hit the granite tabletop. Izuku was above her, kissing and rubbing her in all the right places. His hand crept up her gown as they kissed and Paige enjoyed every second of it. Her hands roamed up and down across Izuku's toned chest as he kissed her, and she felt a wetness in between her legs. Izuku noticed and took advantage of this. He opened her gown up to reveal her naked body and immediately felt himself get hard at it. "Round 2?" he asked and she nodded. They continued and had EC on the kitchen counter once more. Once they were done, they went to go take a shower together. They came out and got dressed after. Paige getting dressed in casual clothing, Izuku getting dressed only in his boxers. They now sat on the couch watching a movie. "We should probably call in sick, huh?" Izuku said as he had his arms around Paige while she sat on his lap with her legs folded and head resting on Izuku's chest. "Yeah, let me get my phone to call in sick." "You should do the same," she said as she stood and went to her room to get her phone. Izuku did the same and saw on his phone that he had 33 missed calls and 56 messages from 𝗬𝗂𝗁, a green queen princess. That was the contact name he had for his mother. As he looked at the phone screen, he felt a pang of guilt for not at least calling to tell her he was okay. He walked out onto the balcony and listened to the cars honking below and the birds chirping. He went into his contacts list and dialed up 𝗬𝗂𝗁, a green queen princess. The phone dialed for 2 seconds until she answered. "Izuku, where were you?" "I tried calling, leaving messages. I didn't know what to do or think. Where are you?" she yelled through the phone. Izuku separated the phone and his ear so that he didn't go deaf in one ear. "Mom, I'm fine, just got sick. I'm at a friend's house, resting," he said, putting on the best sick impression he could, even leading it on with a fake cough. He waited for a response from his mother, and just as expected, she reacted quickly. "Sick? Where are you? I can come get you," she said. 𝗵𝐽 looked at her coat rack with her coat on it, ready to reach for it. Her hand was already halfway there. She was just waiting for Izuku to say the words and she would be there. "Actually, I'm fine where I'm at," she heard. Her arm lowered with a slightly sad face. "Are you sure?" she asked, hoping that he'd want to come home. "Yeah, I'm fine here," Izuku said as he looked up, annoyed with himself. His mother probably sat worrying all night long and he was over here around making jokes. Literally. He wanted to go and hug his mother right now for her worries. But he promised Paige he'd call in sick so that they'd be together the entire day. "Oh, okay," came 𝗵𝐽's voice, sounding a tad bit depressed. 𝗵𝐽 lowered her hand from the coat rack with slight depression. Her son didn't want to spend time with her while he was sick. They always used to spend time together while he was sick, sitting by the TV with blankets and a bowl of soup, enjoying a good movie, or playing hide and seek. Even though he was sick, he always found the energy for that game. 𝗵𝐽 guessed that those days were over now. I mean, it made sense, he was a teenager. No teenager in their right mind wants to spend time with their parents. Izuku looked down. He was now super annoyed and angry with himself for lying. He recognized the sadness in her voice. But he made a promise. And what kind of a man would he be if he broke promises? "Hey Mom, I love you," came through the phone. 𝗵𝐽 smiled at her son's words. "I know, honey," she said and walked over to the bathroom. "Bye, Green Queen," Izuku said with a small smile at the nickname he gave his mother. "Bye, Izuku," his mother said back. Izuku smiled as the call ended. He stood outside for 5 minutes longer before heading back in. 𝗵𝐽 walked over to the bathroom and looked at herself. She had major bags under her eyes from lack of sleep. She had been up all night, worrying about Izuku. She even thought about calling the police 13 times throughout the night. But she resisted on account of the fact that she trusted her son. He was smart, strong, and trustworthy. He could handle himself, and that scared her, because that meant he wouldn't need her soon. She took a deep breath. "He's a good kid, you raised him right. You worry too much," she said to herself and decided to get some sleep. Izuku walked inside and Paige and him sat in the same position as before. "It's done," he said. "Mine too, the man upstairs approved it," she said as she stared at her phone screen. "Who is the man upstairs anyway?" Izuku asked with a curious look in his eyes. "I told you, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Paige said as she placed her phone down. "Yeah, I know that, I mean specifically. Like, what's his name?" Izuku asked. "His name is, Trail of Rescue." The class yelled. They all looked at their sleep-deprived sensei as he held a card that said, "Rescue," on it. "UA is exciting." Kirashima yelled. "Say, where's Midoriya?" Ashido asked as she looked at her classmates. "Don't know, don't care," Mineta said as he sat back. "He's missing out," Kaminari said. "Now, suit up and head to the buses below," Aizawa said as he pressed a button and the shelves came out. Everyone grabbed their stuff and changed to go to the special training. They all loaded onto the bus as they rode to the USA. Once there, they entered and were greeted by Pro Hero 13. She explained that some quirks have the potential to kill. But her lecture got interrupted when Ida pointed something out. "Mr. Aizawa, are those people meant to enhance the learning experience?" he asked with his hand raised. "What people?" Aizawa asked as he turned to see the villains. "No, those are real villains. 𝗧𝗏, protect the children," he commanded as he pulled out a pair of goggles and jumped into the fray. "Let's evacuate it," 13 yelled as she led the kids to the door. But a black mist appeared in front of them. No one leaves," the mist said as people got sucked up and landed in different sectors of the USJ. 13 tried to SCK up the mist, but found that she was going to potentially SCK up the children with it. So she gave up on that plan and devised a new, more simple plan. "Run!" she yelled and all the kids followed her as they ran. Aizawa was struggling a bit to handle all the villains, but he was managing. The question was, how long till he got tired? He spun and punched one of the villains in the face and wrapped another in his cloth. All the separated kids panicked, afraid of the villains and losing their lives. They were all shitting bricks. "Ida, you must run to UA to get help," 13 said as the black mist appeared once again. "No. I cannot leave my fellow classmates in their time of need," he said with tears welling up in his eyes. "Just go," 13 yelled at him. Ida panicked. His legs wouldn't move and he had no time to react as Uraraka tackled him out of the way of the mist. "Please, Ida. You're our only hope," she yelled, and he looked at the fear written all over her face. He quickly stood and bolted for the front gate. "I'm sorry everyone," he thought as he ran off, tears trailing behind him. Aizawa was getting tired. He knew he could only keep it up for so long. "Where's All Might?" a voice asked. "That doesn't matter," Aizawa said as he punched Tamura across the face. Aizawa continued his barrage until Tamura got sick of it. "Bring in Nomu," he yelled, and the mist guy turned to look at his own. He stopped trying to SCK up the children and disappeared, reappearing by his Zmr and opening a gate for a big bird-like creature to come out. Aizawa looked at it and tried to nullify its quirk, but found that he couldn't. He got smacked by the bird creature and landed with a thud. He tried to get up, but the bird creature stepped down on his chest, breaking the ground below him and causing Aizawa to vomit out his breakfast. The Nomu picked him up by the head and started slamming his head into the ground. BLD gushed from Aizawa's face, and the children and 13 watched in horror at the scene. Suddenly a huge sound was heard. They all turned in fear, expecting more villains, but were surprised at what they saw. "Never fear, for I am here," the voice boomed. "All my weight, you're not All Might," 13 said as she looked at the red and blue wearing vigilante. He was crouched down, on top of the 2 broken doors of the USJ. "I was hoping I had said that right, past. I don't know his surname, but I know that his name is Michio something," Paige said as she scrunched up her face in thought. "Oh well, that's fine. Hopefully I'll get to meet him someday. Maybe we could talk science," Izuku said as he adjusted Paige on his lap. "Maybe, but he's super rich. He owns this huge mansion that would make my penthouse look like dog," Paige said as she gestured by spreading her arms. "Oh come on, can't be that big," he said, thinking she was over-exaggerating. "No, it is that big," she said as she put her arms back onto Izuku's toned chest. After that, Paige and Izuku stopped talking and watched their movie. "Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. Wow, is he just gonna die like that?" Izuku questioned. Suddenly his phone rang. He webbed onto it and pulled. It flew through the air and landed in his hand. He flipped it over and looked to see a crime alert at the USJ. And there was map on his screen showing where to go. He said as he looked at Paige's sleeping form. Her body was on the couch, but her head was still on Izuku's lap. He hated to do it, but duty called. He placed a pillow under Paige's head and stood up, walking around the penthouse to find his backpack. "Oh yeah, now I remember," he said as he flipped out the window. He webbed onto the edge of the window to swing and plant his feet onto the side of the building. He began crawling up the wall till he reached the roof. Once there, he saw his backpack webbed onto a vent. He walked over and pulled the webbing free before grabbing his suit. He sniffed it and noticed how it smelt of sweat. "Note to self, wash suit later," he said as he, reluctantly, put the suit on. After the suit was on, he checked his GPS for the crime. "That way," he said and jumped off the top of the building, free falling to the ground before webbing onto the corners of 2 different buildings and slingshotting forward. He swung around the city, trying to reach the USJ as quick as possible. He saw Ida resting on the ground at the police station, panting and wheezing. "So you told the police about the incident. You truly are a hero, Ida," Izuku thought as he swung toward He saw the USJ in his sight as he got closer. He webbed onto the sides of the doors and pulled, kicking the doors down and landing on top of them crouching. "Never fear, for I am here," he yelled in his best All Might impression. And it seemingly worked as everyone turned to face him. Some with faces of happiness, some with fear of having to face the #1 hero. But Their faces soon became surprised when they saw him. With Pro Hero 13 even saying, "All my weight, you're not all might," she said as she held her arms up protectively to stop the children from going near him. Not knowing whether Izuku was a hero or a villain. "Who are you?" she asked, and Izuku smiled under his mask. "Spider-Man at your service," he said, and stood from crouching. 13 flinched, getting ready to SCK him into her black hole if needed. "No funny business, Mr. Spider-Man," she said, and he raised his hands in defense. "I'm here to help," he said, but she still didn't lower her guard. Izuku slowly moved toward the stairs and jumped off. He flew down the stairs like a rocket. He webbed onto the ground in between a group of villains. He pulled to accelerate his descent. He landed HRD on his feet, creating a shockwave, knocking a few brutes back before webbing their arms to their torsos. Izuku then attacked all of them and knocked them all out. He turned to see a rock-like man with green 𝗂𝐲 dripping from his body. Izuku ran up to him and did a flip-off of his body, kicking him in the face and making him fly into the air at the same time. Izuku landed on his feet and webbed onto the brute's face before pulling and making him face plant into the ground and get knocked out. He whipped around as his spidey sense went off to see a green guy with holes in his arms. He shot acid-like bullets at Izuku, but the web swinger was too good. Izuku flipped into the air and twisted to dodge all the bullets. He webbed both the man's arms and tied them to the floor, then punched the man to knock him out. Izuku twisted to see a guy wearing a full suit of armor. He webbed onto the man multiple times before swinging him around like a wrecking ball into other villains. He released the man and he flew into 2 other villains. Suddenly a hand grabbed Izuku's ankle. Then a full man came out the ground. The man began to grow bigger, mixing himself with the cement in the ground to become 10 feet tall. Izuku hung upside down from the man's grip. The man began smashing Izuku into the ground. Midoriya managed to break free though, after the man's grip faltered. Izuku jumped up to the man's head and grabbed him by the chin. He flipped over the man. He then pulled the man off his feet and slammed him into the ground, causing it to crack and make a window of opportunity that knocked back a few people. Izuku landed on the unconscious man's back. He flipped off and landed onto a villain's shoulders and wrapping his legs around the villain's neck before falling backwards in a flip and taking the villain with him. He slammed the villain's head into the ground. He stood over the villain's unconscious body and webbed another brute in the face before pulling him toward him. The women stumbled forward and Izuku kicked her in the face once she was in front of him. He saw a villain across the plaza from him and created a ball of webs in his hand before throwing it with such force at the woman's face that she did a backflip when it hit her. He webbed onto the back of the ball of webbed and pulled toward him, like a yo-yo. Instead of catching it, he let it fly past him into the stomach of the man that was trying to attack him from behind. He then swung the ball around and smacked countless people with it, before releasing it. He continued on with his barrage of attacks until all the villains in the plaza were taken care of. "You Spider Quirk users are all a nuisance," 𝗕𝗫𝗲 said as he lunged for Izuku's face. Izuku webbed onto 𝗕𝗫𝗲's face and pulled it to the ground, making him face plant. "Is baby 𝗕𝗫𝗲 mad? Take a nap, it'll do you good," Izuku said as 𝗕𝗫𝗲's face hit the floor, making him get knocked out. He turned to the bird creature thing and saw it release Aizawa. Dropping the poor man in a pool of his own BLD, Izuku became infuriated. His BLD was boiling from rage. These people terrorized his classmates, beat his teacher half to death and made him have to leave page. He felt the adrenaline rushing through his body. It felt amazing. He webbed onto the floor by the bird creature's leg. He pulled and slid across the ground and stopped once he got there. From there, he jumped and uppercut the bird creature. The bird creature flew up and once its foot was in front of Izuku's face, he grabbed it and slammed the thing into the ground. He continued his barrage of attacks but nothing seemed to work. "Nomu, crush him," 𝗕𝗫𝗲 said as he woke up. The Nomu raised its arms and swung down. Izuku raised his arms to block. He felt a light crack from his arms and the ground below him cracked from the force of the Nomu. Izuku jumped backwards. He felt his arms. It hurt to move them. They weren't completely broken, but they were still somewhat broken. "This is bad. I can't use OFA in case my friends find out it's me," he thought. And that's when it happened. He felt as if he got pulled from his body and flew through all space and time to get 𝗃𝗃. He stood in a black room that had a purple mist flowing around by his feet and white dots all around that seemed like stars. The only light source being a door that was partially open. Why do you say you can't use one for all? A voice asked. It sounded like a woman's voice. The door opened and a woman with purple hair and black eyes walked out. She had on a hero costume with yellow gloves. She walked over to Izuku with a smile. Because if I do, my friends will know it's me. That I'm the Spider-Man, he said back as he looked at his feet. What's more important, your friends' lives or your identity? She asked as she circled around him. My friends' lives, Izuku said. Then give me your hand, she said as she stopped circling around him and stuck out her hand to him. He took the helping hand without asking. He felt himself back inside his body on the battlefield. Nothing has changed since he left. And the 𝗏𝗵𝗲 was about to swing again. Izuku's eyes became purple. But no one could tell from under the mask. He caught the punch as if it were nothing. He pulled the 𝗏𝗏𝗲 toward him and punched so hard that he flew across the USJ into the fire rescue section. Izuku jumped over to the fire rescue section and stood in an inferno with the 𝗏𝗏𝗲. Izuku punched the 𝗏𝗏𝗲 across the face once more. It flew through the ground onto the first floor of the burning building they were in from the 6th floor. Izuku hopped through the hole in the ground and grabbed the 𝗏𝗏𝗲. He punched it multiple times in the gut. Each punch sending an earthquake through the USJ. He then threw the 𝗏𝗏𝗲 out the building and chased it. Izuku smiled in the dark room next to the women. She was having so much fun. They were both looking at the battle through Izuku's eyes. Like having two giant flat-screen TVs next to each other. They saw how they punched the 𝗏𝗏𝗲 into the water and jumped for joy. Yay! The women yelled and looked at Izuku. Did you see that? She asked excitedly. Yeah, I saw. We were like pow. Izuku yelled back. They were both like two little children playing a video game. Just getting happy at the slightest thing. Spider-Man punched the 𝗏𝗏𝗏 128 times in less than a minute in that moment with 100% smash each time. Before delivering a devastating uppercut. It sent the 𝗏𝗏𝗏 into the air. Izuku jumped after it and grabbed the 𝗏𝗏𝗏's leg before throwing him to the ground. The ground broke on contact and the force sent everyone on their asses. Ooh, that was a good one, the women said next to Izuku. Sure was. Hey, let me try something, Izuku said. One of Spider-Man's eyes became green once more as he jumped up. He punched the roof of the USJ, blowing a hole through the roof of the USD. He kept flying higher and higher, till they were over 20 kilometers up. He shot webs next to the 𝗏𝗏𝗏 that was 2 inches thick. He pulled and shot down so fast that a fire started appearing by his feet. He hit the 𝗏𝗏𝗏 dead in the chest with a double kick so strong, it created shockwaves throughout the USJ that stretched out for another 8 kilometers after the USJ. The 𝗏𝗏𝗏 now lay there, seemingly defeated. Yay, but there are still other villains to take care of, the women said. Don't hog all the fun, a man wearing a green hero suit with shoulder-length hair said. He placed his hand on Izuku's head. And his one eye got mixed in between and shade of purple and light green. Then Spider-Man dashed and defeated 20 villains in less than a minute. Didn't know we're playing games, a woman with blue hair and a blue hero suit said, walking G out of the door. She placed a hand onto Izuku's shoulder and Spider-Man took out 34 villains. Stop playing games, a guy with red hair and hero suit said as he walked out the door. Let me show you how a pro does it, he said and placed a hand on Izuku's other should, making Izuku's eyes be mixed with the colors blue, red, light green, dark green and purple now. Izuku took out 43 villains after that. Show off, the purple-haired women said. You guys are seriously doing this? A woman with orange hair and hero suit asked. She placed a hand on Izuku's knee as she sat down. Spider-Man then defeated 47 villains. A man with light purple hair and hero suit came out, not saying a word. Instead, placing his hand on Izuku's other knee. Spider-Man then defeated 59 villains. The man smiled before another man's voice was heard. You kids still doing this? The voice of a man with white hair said. He wasn't wearing a hero suit though. He wore a normal old suit and tie that didn't seem to fit him. Everyone was silent as he walked over and scotted in front of Izuku. He placed a hand on Izuku's chest, and Izuku felt so much power flow through him just from this man's touch. Now Spider-Man's eyes were glowing every color of the rainbow. Red, blue, dark purple, light green, orange, but most importantly, white. Spider-Man then defeated 108 villains. Those were the last couple of villains left. "You kids are amateurs," the man with the white hair said as he stood properly. "And you," he said pointing to Izuku. "We won't always come to your rescue. You seem to use OFA as a scapegoat when in tough situations. That's not right. So, we won't always come to your rescue, and I'm warning you of that now. One for All isn't meant to get out of tough situations like that. It's meant to instill hope in the hopeless. Put a smile on the faces of the sad. You're using this wonderful gift wrongly. If you have no intention of using it properly, then give it to someone who will," the man said and shoved his hands in his pockets as he walked toward the door. "Come on all of you," he said as all previous OFA users left. "Just because I said all this, doesn't mean that we don't care. As the original user of the quirk, I feel like that father of One for All. I'm watching out for you. Learn to use the power or don't. But I tell you, you'll find it easier to fight with O," he said and began to close the door. But left the door 10% open. "But I'll leave this door open, just in case you decided to use it. I know you've got a chaotic life right now. Balancing secret hero life with normal and scientist life and love life. But just try," he said. "How did you? We've been watching you. Keeping doing the right thing. Just as I said, I feel like I'm the father of OFA, so I feel like I'm kinda your father too. Use this 10% of OFA we've left you wisely, and I'll open the door a little bit more if I see that you're worthy," he said and walked off. Izuku contemplated what the father of OFA had said. "I'll try," was all he said before a bright light shone. Izuku looked at the bright light and suddenly he was looking at a semi-rectangle. He shook his head a little before beginning to walk toward Aizawa. He picked up his teacher bridal style. He walked over to the stairs and walked up them as a sudden gust of wind appeared. "Where does the threat lie?" a voice questioned. All Might yelled as he arrived with practically an army of police officers backing him up. Izuku stopped once he reached the top of the stairs. Police officers arrived and pointed their guns at Izuku. "Put your hands where we can see them." The one yelled at him. "Whoa, I never did any of this. I'm not a villain," he said as he looked at all of them. "I said, put your hands where we can see them." The man yelled again, this time more aggressive. "Okay, let me just put him down," Izuku said as he bent down slowly. "Stop moving." Another officer yelled. "Okay, let's just calm down," Izuku said as he stood up straight again. "I was the first one that stopped all the villains here," he tried to explain. "Are you resisting arrest?" Another officer yelled as he stepped forward a little. "No, I'm just trying to explain," he said as he placed Aizawa on the ground. "We told you not to move." The first officer yelled. "I think this situation is getting a little out of hand. Just let me explain what happened," Izuku said as he took a step forward. "No. Stay where you are." The second officer yelled. Suddenly, more officers arrived as they formed a circle around him. "This is a misunderstanding," he said as he raised his hands slowly. "He didn't do anything. He saved us," Momo yelled as she stepped toward the police. "Stay back, citizen," the officer ordered, shoving Momo onto the floor as he did. She landed with a thud and Ashido, Shoji and Mineta helped her up. "Stop. He saved us when no one else would. He's a hero," Uraraka said as she stepped forward as well. "Actually, by records, he doesn't have a hero license. There's no record of any hero with a spider-based quirk," Detective Tsukachi said as he stepped forward. "Arrest him," he continued as the officers surrounding him began to walk forward slowly. Izuku found himself squinting as the police lights shone into his face. "Think Izuku." He thought as he was racking his brain for ideas on how to get out of the situation he was in. He turned to see his classmates being protected and held back by All Might and 13. He turned once more to see the police all walking toward him, some behind by their cars and the SWAT team arriving with a few members of the Japanese army. "Think." He heard a clicking of a gun as he sweated bricks, thinking of a way out of the situation. He now wished that he hadn't left the penthouse. That he had just stayed with Paige. That he hadn't donned this outfit today and became the Spider-Man. But there was no time for that now. As selfish as it may sound, he needed to focus on himself for the time being. He began. Stop moving. A man yelled as Izuku began to lean forward slightly. It's just a sneeze, it's kinda dusty around here. All this dirt on the floor. It's making my allergies go crazy, he said in a normal tone. He faked sneezed as he jumped and threw a web bomb down. All the officers around him didn't react fast enough and got caught in the webs. Izuku saw this as his chance. He began running toward the exit at top speeds. When All Might suddenly appeared in front of him, arms outstretched like a wall. Izuku jumped up and punched the pro across the face as hard as he could. All Might simply turned his head a little at the punch as Izuku rolled on the ground behind him now. Sorry, Izuku said as he sprinted toward the road, and then jumped up and webbed onto the back of a van that was moving. He pulled and landed on the roof of the van and crouched to stay on. Suddenly, 𝐬𝗂𝗧𝗏 vans pulled up next to him. The men hung out the window as they aimed at him. Izuku panicked and flipped backwards, landing on the hood of a car behind him. The car he landed on went down then up again from the sudden weight change. Izuku flipped backwards onto another car as that car took a different road onto the highway. The vans followed though, breaking the law and making an illegal U-turn. He watched as they came after him, still with guns ready. He began to hop from car to get forward, till he jumped on top of an oil truck and thought of a plan. They couldn't shoot the truck, because they'd risk a big explosion. Izuku looked forward and saw a tunnel. He bent backwards 90 degrees to dodge the bricks. Once they were out of the tunnel, he stood properly again, and turned back to see the vans still hot on his tail. He looked forward and saw a bridge ahead. Once they reached the bridge, he jumped up and landed in the road of the bridge. He raised his hand and signaled a driver to stop just before the driver would have hit him. He tried to web onto a building next to the road, but found that his webs didn't reach that far. He muttered under his breath. He ran and did a twist flip onto the top of a truck before shooting his webs. The webs just barely made it as they attached to the corners of two buildings, and Izuku used them to slingshot forward. He flew through the air as he turned and suddenly saw a police helicopter with a sniper pointing the barrel of the gun at him. His eyes widened as the sniper took aim and got ready to fire as soon as Izuku would stop moving. He webbed onto a billboard and pulled, flying behind it as the sniper took the shot and hit the billboard. Izuku sprinted across the roof and dived off into an alleyway. He saw an open window and he webbed onto the edges of it and pulled. He landed inside a person's apartment and slid backwards as he crouched. He stood up straight and turned his head to be met with three slack-jawed children looking straight at him. He waved slowly as the parent walked into the room and dropped the bowl of food she was holding. Izuku webbed onto the bowl and pulled it toward him before it could hit the floor and shatter. It landed in his hand and he put it down on the coffee table. "Stay in school, kids," he said as he ran and jumped out the other window. The kids ran toward the window to see Izuku swing away while the parent just stood there, still shocked that Spider-Man was in her house. "It's him, Mom," the child yelled. The women nodded. "I know Mori," she said. Izuku swung into a construction site and stood on a pile of metal beams. All the construction workers turned to look at him. "Keep up the good work, boys," he yelled as he webbed onto a beam above him and pulled. He landed onto the beam before jumping off it and webbing onto the another building. "Spider-Man needs to disappear," he said as he swung into an abandoned building. Quickly changed and jumped out the building on the other side as 𝗧𝗵𝗵. He walked out the alleyway he ended up in from jumping out the building and acted casually as the police helicopter and 𝗬𝗂𝗧𝗏 vans drove past. He walked with his hands in his pockets all the way to Paige's penthouse. He walked up the stairs like a normal person and entered the penthouse without knocking. "So how was your adventures of being Spider-Man?" Paige asked as she sat on the couch, pouring herself a cup of wine. "Spider-Man, huh? That's really funny that you think I'm Spider-Man," he said as he rubbed the back of his neck. "Izuku, Spider-Man wears the exact same suit that me and you had made together. Coincidence?" I think not, she said as she drank the wine. Okay, I'm sorry, he said as he walked over to her. Sorry for what? You've been saving lives. That's nothing to be sorry about, she said as she moved the wine in the cup around. So you're not mad? He asked a bit confused. No, why would I be? She said as she held the glass up to the light and looked at the wine. No, there's something wrong here. You're not mad, but you're feeling something else, he said as he walked closer. I'm not feeling anything, Paige said as she drank some of the wine. You're feeling something. Is it pain, sorrow, hurt, worry? He said, and Paige inhaled sharply when he said worry. It's worry, isn't it? You're worried I could get severely hurt, he said as he now stood in front of her. He looked down at her as she just stared at the wine. I'm not worried about you, she said. Yes, you are, he said as he crouched down and saw how she looked away from him. You're worried for my well-being, he said and put his hand on her cheek. He turned her head to make her look at him. When he did, he felt something wet on his hand. Tears. Paige was crying. I saw on the news. You could have been shot. She yelled at him. Then what? What would I have done if you'd gone to prison? Or worse? She asked with a quivering lip. I don't want to lose you, Izuku, she said as she hugged him. You won't, he said as he hugged back. Look, it's fine, just please be careful, she said as she cried into his shoulder. I promise, he said as he hugged back. They sat like that, with Paige crying into Izuku's shoulder. All the kids of 1A got a week off school to recover from the trauma of the villain attack. The police are apprehended all the villains and locked them up for good. Except, Tomura still managed to escape. And Spider-Man.